or yeah, like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, classical, yeah. Like we should have a chandelier or
It's the best
something.
thing. Strawberry shortcake is the best.
Yeah.
I agree.
Everybody's in here when we get started.
Oh, jeez.
Always last when there's food involved. Bad priorities.
He's always laughing regardless of this.
I didn't see the sheriff eating anything.
He has to seek out his own cooked meals, right?
Yes.
I'm the one that brought food.
Had some good friends over the years.
I am good.
Uncomfortable, but I'm sure
It
there's.
was 77 in here like 3 hours ago.
Oh,
There you
well,
go.
it's not, I'm sure,
Good
77
idea.
now.
Thank
Uncomfortable.
goodness.
Careful of the pulse.
You would have been fine, I'm sure.
Fine.
The rest of us not so much.
We ready to go ahead and get started? All right. First thing on our agenda here, number 2, is the grant processes and timelines. And really looking through all this, these are all the topics that I had emailed out to everybody, and we cut a lot of them due to the budget. So the reason I put this on here is because a few commissioners were questioning the timeliness of the grants and felt that they were, I don't know, don't think deceptive is the right word for it, but they were, a specific word I remember is blindsided. You know, so I want to put this on here to clear up that. So there's this sheet that Roseanne put out, it's got bullet points on it, and
No,
one,
no,
two,
that,
three.
I didn't do this.
You didn't do that? Who did
No,
this?
the elected officials
Well, you
did this.
passed it out.
I passed it
All
out,
right,
the elected
so
officials did this.
looking at it,
They
it's
got
got,
together and thought they'd give us,
so
Thank you, guys.
much
1,
appreciated.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 8th bullet has on there, grant awards can have short turnaround times for acceptance. Since grants are not accepted, there may be awards, so short turnaround. I just wanted to highlight that before whoever would like to speak on this. You know, that's the one thing I would like to highlight. So I'll open the floor for whoever wants to finish speaking on this, you know, or has any topics or any questions about our grants, especially the ones that felt like, you know, there was something tricky going on and why we had grants at the last minute coming up on our agenda.
Well, I'll start.
Carol
Oh,
already.
Carol.
Oh, sorry, no, go ahead.
No.
They were just saying go up there, so I was, go ahead, Roseanne.
Okay, so what I wanted to say was, I took a grant writing course that was called Grant Writing Boot Camp. And this lady, Beverly Browning, that was the teacher. So I would highly recommend if anybody's would like to. This is my copy, but certainly, as long as you don't forget who gave it to you. You're welcome to look through it or
You better
whatever.
put your name on it.
What did you
You better
say?
write your name on it.
Yeah, I could do that. That's all I wanted to say.
And the only thing I was gonna say was, we just put this all together, so it's not like one of our work of ideas that we had about that we thought maybe it would be helpful for the Board of Commissioners to know, but if there's any questions,
I
You know.
do.
sure.
Could you expound on, like, the question was the last, it wasn't the last grant we had, but it was a few ago. And we'd already did the agenda and it, like the day of, I think we just had one last Thursday too.
We did.
We had
It
one
was
this
us.
last Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the question was, a couple months ago, you know, does this normally happen like this? You know, I was like, well, I really don't, you know, so that's why I put this on here.
I'd
so-
say it's pretty common. I mean,
Yeah.
and I can only speak for the grants that we get. Like the one that we asked for last week that you generously put on the agenda for the 4D program for child support that we get 66% back. That's a renewal grant, but because it's renewal, they expect a short turnaround time. And so they basically tell us you have to have it signed by X date, and we have no flexibility. So when we became aware of that, we emailed Matt or called him, I can't remember which, and he talked to Jeremiah and we got it on. But the other thing, I guess, that, and it's in one of the bullet points, but sometimes to make more sense of it, like in competitive grant awarding, for example, say that I applied for a grant and then on second thought, somebody here thought, no, that's not a good grant for us. It's important that it is a short turnaround time so backup awards can be made to other people that want those grants, because usually there's a very short time frame that you have to spend the grant money. And because of the way the federal government does it, which I am not a fan of, a lot of times they make grant awards late and then you lose time during that grant cycle. And so you have such a short time, sometimes it's really hard for us, even with our drug court programs that have been up and running for a long time, to be able to spend the money, because you can only spend it on certain things. And if there's competitive bidding and stuff, you might, instead of having 12 months, only have 6 months. So that's also why sometimes we might bring something to you right away and say, hey, we need to get this approved because we want to start spending that money, because that means then we don't have to spend county money. But I don't know if that's helpful.
What it is, you were gonna say something?
No, I said that is.
So with that said, spending money, the fourth bullet says, many grants require matching funds. You know, so I think, you know, maybe, you know, for people to feel more comfortable, I guess if we had that put up front, if we had how much and then where it comes from, because Jen needs time to adjust our budget for matching funds, you know.
Yeah,
if we
and
were
just speaking for myself, we have a form that we fill out and send to Jen and Matt that has that information of whether there's a match or not, what the money is, blah, 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 because we have a policy. And so we usually communicate with them right away and say, how much detail do you want? And then they tell us. I mean, at least that's the way it's worked, and Matt knows more.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too, I mean, there's a couple things to think about, is that the renewal grants can be a little bit different, because we're kind of renewing a program that already exists, but in a lot of cases where we're applying for grants, the board is typically involved in the initial application process. So there's usually a resolution that especially if there's matching funds, there's usually a resolution saying, you know, we support this application, you know, you put it in, and then you wait, and you wait, and you wait,
Just
and you
like
wait.
we did in the special meeting.
Exactly, right, and that's where we had, like, the broadband was a great example, you know, we applied for that back in, was it early December, I think?
Yeah.
And then you waited and waited, and then finally, once MDARD figured everything out, they said, okay, here you go, you've won the grant, and you gotta have this back to us in 10 days.
Yeah.
And there really isn't a lot of leeway for it, but I mean, I think that's where maybe some of the disconnect is that in some of those programs, the actual application process sometimes happens months ahead of time. And then some of what we were doing was just accepting the grant after we had already gone through the work of getting it. So I think that's something to keep in mind also.
And one thing I did with that last grant was I don't know if I called everybody or I called a specific number, but if you all are we ain't making no decisions tonight, but, you know, individually let me know, or we'll talk about the next cow. If you all want me to, when we get a grant notification, I can call everybody individually and say, hey, you know, do you want a special meeting, or can I add this to the agenda? Because that's, you know, it comes to me as the chair to put it on the agenda, or it's been thrown out there to have a special meeting. So I called like 5 people. Well, all 5 of them say put it on the agenda. That's, you know, pass the vote.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind too is that, you know, and we'll touch on it a little bit later, but with the way that we've moved to the committee of the whole process, that also does create, you know, some added pressure in that regard too. I mean, I think overall it's gone very well, but you do end up in those scenarios where if you have, you know, 30 days to sign a grant, and if the grant award comes in at the right time and it just happens to be at a spot where, you know, we've already created an agenda, or we wouldn't have another regular meeting in time, we end up kind of getting stuck having to do, you know, a special meeting or something, kind of just because of that format. And I don't think it's a bad thing per se, but it's just kind of one of those things we have to kind of handle as we're moving through with the committee of the whole process.
I'm gonna
There's gonna be special meetings at times with things like that that are time sensitive.
I want to back up to what I just said. I'm not calling people asking for votes. You know, just seeing what the general consensus is before I put it on the agenda. So I don't want that held against me later on in the court of law. That's not what I'm doing. It's not my intentions. So, all right. Anything else, ma'am?
No, unless there's any other questions that we could be helpful in answering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's been, you know, it's very informative what you've been able to provide for us here. Just learning about the grants and how they can be a short turnaround, and I can understand the urgency to sign off on it, especially as you mentioned, feds often can grant awards at the last minute, and then there's a tight timeline when the money needs to be spent. At any given moment, is there like a estimated how many grants we have out, grant applications we have out?
It's a good question.
I don't know. I mean, maybe admin might know because of our grant policy. We do connect with them, but sometimes too, we'll start working on a grant, we'll decide not to pursue it because we can't get what we need to be able to support the grant, and we might not find that out until we get halfway through, so. But they might have a general idea based on,
I think we could probably pull together a list of what we have currently.
Is there any value though in tracking that, you know? Or is it just a wasted effort?
it feels like you'd want, and this is just me speaking my opinion, that you'd want all of us, as long as we're not committing county money, to apply for as many as possible, and it might be a wasted effort tracking all of that, because some of them will come to naught. But and again, this is just my opinion, if I can get somebody else to pay for it, I'd like to, but I also don't want to waste Matt and Jen's time, for example, if I'm just putting out feelers to see, well, is it something we can apply for? I don't go to them until I know we're gonna apply and let them know whether there's matching money or not.
Yeah, I was just,
But-
sorry, I was just curious if tracking it would kind of help us try to stay ahead of it when it.
But that's up to you guys, however you would like that tracked, and we'll, speaking for myself, cooperate.
Applications out there, then I don't know if that would be.
We've been fortunate with Sarah, because she's approached us for a couple of grant opportunities, and then she tracks it, and keeps
And
us
then she
informed
keeps
of
us-
where we're at in
yeah.
the process.
Sarah
Sonia.
from Market Van Buren? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's been really helpful.
I have a question for Hope. The grant for the windows and the roof, did that get submitted?
We'll know the end of this month. That is, of course, the blight elimination funding, and if I could add, there's 4 phases to the blight elimination funding, and each phase is different. The first 2 phases, which we were awarded funds in the first phase, we have applied for funds for the second phase, which we'll know by the end of this month. Third phase will be federal money. It'll be a whole different
Yeah.
set of rules, a
Yeah.
whole different application process.
Yeah.
But I do provide an actual grant application for every single project. So I have so far submitted 17 grants for the blight elimination program. And we've got a guaranteed 500,000 coming for round 3. But again, it's ARPA money, so it's gonna be a whole different animal. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And then we have the My Hope program, which is also federal grant money. So tracking it, the auditing of it, everything's different depending on if it's state money or federal money.
I've got a question if anybody else doesn't. But I don't know if it's Hope, Jen, Carol, or Matt. Do we have a policy for matching funds if we have to have a grant and there's matching funds that we have to do? Is there a policy that's out there to prevent somebody from just committing the county?
Yes.
It is?
It's in the grant policy.
Yeah, that way, it's a $1 million grant, but we gotta come up with $500,000 and somebody goes out and dedicates that to us, then what do we do,
Sure.
Then we're on the hook, so we have to follow that policy. Yes,
And
ma'am.
the other thing is,
Yeah.
for these blight elimination dollars, I actually get more points if we were to contribute some money.
Yeah.
We haven't on any of them, but
Yeah.
that gives us less points, so we're not as competitive when we don't
Right.
put some kind of
Right.
funding towards it. So it's
Yeah, that-
something to keep in mind.
That ain't what I was really thinking, this is more of just a different procedural question, that's all. But with that, that's worth it, we're getting a lot of money. Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna say, when the grant comes to you guys too, we might get awarded, and until you guys officially approve that and sign off, we're not committed to anything, we're just applying for it, we don't have to accept it, you don't have to sign that piece of paper.
That's right.
Okay.
So that is the kind of final check. And I was just gonna note also, according to the grant policy, people should be letting me know when they're applying, I should see those applications before they're sent off, as well as they should be letting me know if they did get the award or did not get the award, and if it's something that might be helpful to start tracking from here on out, I can do that and have that document shared with you guys where you could pull it up at any time. So I'm just saying if that's something that there's an appetite for, just let me know and we could do that.
Okay, all right. Anything else on this topic? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'd like to say that we, in my district, we applied for a Canadian National grant, and it was 100% match, and did the math, I did the rest of it, because I didn't want to do the math. So, and we get awarded the grant, but what we didn't know was, there was another organization that administered the grant, and we had to pay membership then to that organization. None of that was disclosed beforehand. So you gotta be, you know, some grants, I mean, most of the grants that you guys look at, you're pretty sure that you know what's going on, but we didn't know that we were gonna have to join that organization, and it was $1,100. So, you know, looking at a grant, you gotta be careful.
All right. Anything else on this?
So there's a form that they fill out for the grant, and as Jen said, that form should be submitted to her when it gets submitted, so that you're aware of it. So you guys are applying for grants before we even know about it, right? 'Cause just, you're never guaranteed the money.
No,
It depends on the circumstances.
for the most part.
You know, depending on matching funds, in some cases, like there may be a requirement for a resolution from, you know, the board of commissioners committing those funds as part of the application process. In some cases, that isn't required, but maybe we apply and we'll see what happens. I mean, generally, I think, maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually if there's matching funds involved, we try to bring that on the front end and
Yeah.
not, hey, we got this,
Oh,
and
yeah.
what do you think? You know, I mean, usually we try to incorporate that early.
And I just wanted to point out that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down, it talks, 6 and 7 talk a little bit about the applications themselves. And a lot of them are going to a multi-phased, like, online process. And so we worked the last time we did it with Jen and Matt about that fact, because it used to be in the old days, we could prepare an application, photocopy it, and give it to the finance director, and they could give us our blessing before we submitted it online, because you just PDF'd it. But now all the data actually has to be input into these systems, and I'm not a tech person, but you basically type in, and you can't generate the complete packet until you actually submit it. So we've created a form, like, and I can send another one to Matt and Jen if you want for them to share with you, but like kind of just summarizes everything so that they can see what all the key details are and then ask questions, which Jennifer asked a lot the last time we had one, and we went back and forth. And then they said yay or nay on that, so following the grant policy. But it does, when that grant policy was written, a lot of the grants weren't submitted that way, so it's hard to have the full grant application any longer, like as one document, because there's a whole bunch of parts. And I think you said that was the way some of your guys's were as well,
Yeah,
right?
it is getting to be more complicated in that way. I mean, I think sometimes the application process is easier, you know, in that way. You know, you're not handwriting things, or,
Yeah,
you know, I mean, that
That's
makes
true.
it simpler. But in terms of, you're right, preparing documents that you can then just distribute is a little more complicated.
Could it be appropriate to relook at the grant policies? Update it for the current way we do things?
Good look. I mean, I think one easy way would be to look at kind of adapting the form we use with the courts, to kind of have that encompass any of those grants where if we're not able to get, you know, paper copy in advance, to have at least the conveyance of here's what the grant is, here's what it does, and that kind of overview of what we're applying for. I mean, that would be a simple way to do it potentially. That's definitely something we can look at.
When was the last time that policy's been sent to the policy committee for 2021?
Becky did it.
So it's been a couple of years. It's
Yeah.
been fairly recent, but
yeah.
And
There
that
was
wouldn't
a
cost
lot.
us
But
no
things-
money to review it. We have
No,
a committee
things
for
change
it.
so fast that,
they do.
you know,
There was a lot.
probably
of
wouldn't hurt to
just
review it,
making sure
I agree with you,
Yeah.
yeah.
We could be compliant if we needed to reach out to an attorney beforehand.
Mhm.
They're giving away free money, and a lot of times there's very specific
Yeah.
guidelines to those, and just making sure that everything's in line. And so normally that's why it goes to the finance director first.
Who's on that policy committee in here? I don't remember.
Me, Mary, RJ,
Yeah,
and Joyce.
that's something you all could look into if you so choose.
Hope you mentioned something about a point system, is that
Yeah.
relevant at all? I don't know, I'm not familiar with the point system.
And that was on the bullet point too about,
It depends on the grant, like
If it's
all of the
competitive
DNR
grants,
grants, they're
Yeah,
all
it's all
point
points. It's all
systems.
about points.
Yeah,
it's under bullet point 7 about the scoring process, and there's usually a rubric, and depending on the grant, the rubric's different, so it's kind of hard to give you a specific example, but we could certainly share some applications if you wanted to see them.
Yeah, I think Scott had mentioned points.
You score
Yes.
more because we're a dark sky
Yeah.
clerk.
Yeah, he thought that would help us.
And
And
more
if you have a
applications
match,
say that they're a dark
they,
sky.
they applied for this, it's called the Spark Grant, and it's coming from the DNR. And there is no match to the Spark Grants, but if you have a match, and we have a match, because we have money that was donated for
The parks.
a structure, it's 200,000.
Yeah,
Say-
nature
Tell me?
center.
Yeah, specifically for nature center.
Yeah, and it's $200,000. So we think with the Spark Grant, that will give us extra points, because the DNR grants always have points to them. And the DNR grants, if you don't, I mean, like, almost midway through, oftentimes I've seen them return it to you and say, you didn't do this and this and this. So does kind of give you a leg up then, so that you know what you have to finish up. It gives you a better chance.
And the only other thing I thought of while we're here, the good thing about you guys having people submit a lot of grants, like for example, a couple years ago, United Way knew we were looking for money for something, and we did not qualify for the grant, but they ended up with extra money, and they just called us and said, hey, do you want to apply for it? It's going to be like a one-time
Yeah.
thing, and we said, of course, and then we got it. I think it was like 5 years ago, but that's the good thing of having those feelers out there, because if they know you have a particular project you're trying to fund. So,
We had somebody say that, with Sarah from Market Van Buren, you know, why didn't she apply for this grant? Why didn't she apply for that grant? Why didn't she apply for that grant? That's not really their, is that their part of their, because we give them money, is that part of their responsibility, or is it ours? If we see something, maybe we should, you know, if you complain about it, then tell her to start doing it or start the process, or you know what I'm saying? Anybody
It works
understand?
both ways. It
Yeah.
works both ways, because she'll make us aware of a grant,
Yep.
or we'll say, well, what about this grant?
Mhm.
So there's a grant called the RAC 2 grant, and she is helping one of the communities in Cass County apply for that grant.
So do we have a process for that? So say if I'm looking online, we'll use Facebook to be funny. Looking on Facebook, oh, look at this grant, you know, help out chairman of the board. Do we send that to say, hey, Sarah, can you look into this?
Sure.
Can we do that? That's what we
Sure.
do, you know?
Sure.
I mean, what we've been doing, I think, a lot of the time, and I think you're right, it's been collaborative. I mean, we've had a couple of instances where, you know, we've approached Sarah with something and said, hey, would you guys be able to help us with this?
Mhm.
Or, I mean, she has also done the same thing in reverse and said, hey, we found this opportunity.
You all
guys
might
think
be
it's really
interested.
good for you. I mean,
Yeah.
so, I mean, we could work it both ways. I mean, certainly if somebody sees something, they're welcome to send it to us, and we can coordinate on our end with Sarah, Market Van Buren, or, you know, vice versa, it works as well, too.
Yeah. All right. So I'm just trying to avoid the future questions that I've heard over the 2 years I've been here. All right. This is a good one. This is a good piece of paper to keep.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Anything else? Going once, twice, sold. All right, number 3. We had put this on here originally, classification and compensation, and some of our commissioners were, this is one of your points, but I got an email from the electeds that due to the circumstances of our budget, that the budget is more important than this, but it was already on the agenda, and I don't want to make that sole decision, so it was asked of me if we could just drop this. You know, that's up to the group, that's not up to me alone. So I don't know if you all want to continue to talk about number 3, classification and compensation, or we move on and go to the, because I say the budget is more important, because don't make no sense to talk about raises when you ain't got no money to pay it
I'm fine with moving on, provided we do talk about this
in the
in the future.
future.
In the near future,
Postpone discussion.
postpone.
Yeah. So we need to go around the table. What do you think, Jim?
I would just as soon go into the budget myself, because
All right,
that's
so we're gonna move,
our, as far as I'm concerned, this even says that's our priority,
yeah. All right,
so.
Joyce, move on, or
Yeah, I will.
Mary,
I totally agree, and we could pick this up
Later
another
on.
day.
same, we got Roseanne. All right, we're moving on. Thank you. All right, number 4. That one is me. Well, all of them are mine. Board of Commissioners, the responsibilities and duties. A lot of times when we have controversial resolutions or motions or subjects that we have individually, we tend to get a lot of hate mail. You know, oh boy, you know, how dare you are some of the ones I get. The audacity of you, Chairman Jones and Vice Chair Leyland, and the nerve you have. This is not your job. This is what you're here to do. And so I think Matt passed out Michigan State, Go Blue, University Extension, main functions of county commissioners in Michigan. Is this what you printed out for us?
Yeah, it touches on kind of the major points. You know, so obviously setting policy is a major one. You know, of course, policy can take on a few different, phases, but that kind of would include things like countywide ordinances. I mean, not that we pass very many.
Right.
Mostly because you're limited as a county of what you can enforce at a local level, but ordinances would count. Obviously looking at policies that deal largely with budget, appropriations, personnel, capital improvements, county services, and other internal matters. Legislative oversight is another one. That's one of the second major function. Obviously, again, because of limits on county lawmaking powers and the statutory assignments of duties of elected officers, county commissioners can devote some of their time to looking over the shoulders of administrators in the county. That's working through the administration office, working with our elected officials, to try to seek out what we're looking for the vision for the county. Obviously, oversight in terms of making sure tasks are being carried out effectively and efficiently, and assessing whether the programs or the effects of the program that the county funds are being allocated for are being used correctly. Constituent services is a major one. I mean, obviously that's going to be coordinating with residents, so when things come up, residents of the county are certainly going to look at, who their commissioner might be, and I'm sure quite a few of you get calls at times on issues and matters that are important to people, and so that's a major part of it also. It's of course year-round, it's not something that comes up once in a great while, but all the time. And so that's obviously another major one. And then kind of the other one is obviously the budget itself is a major undertaking. And you're kind of looking at the future of what the county's going to do and incorporating policies and programs and things like that into an overarching vision for the future. And so that's a major driver as well. So I think the information there was pretty good. After that, just as a reminder, I took the commissioner responsibilities page from the website and printed that, because that's kind of establishing from the commissioner's own perspective what is listed as responsibilities as far as the board was concerned.
And that's the last 3 pages there?
See, there's 2 pages there, and the last 3 pages come from MCL 46, which is the act that creates County Board of Commissioners, and that was specifically the powers of County Board of Commissioners to kind of give a little bit right from the state law as to what that looks like.
So this one is one you're talking about right off the website?
Yeah, that one is right on our website, and I thought, maybe it'd be a good idea to print that off, just so everybody can see this is what has been defined, at least on the website, in terms of what the commissioner's responsibilities are, and what we, detail to the public as that as well.
Mm-hmm. So when I get people complaining about their neighbor and their grass is too tall, and somebody tells them to call the county commissioner, I can probably just email them this or take a picture of it and send it to them, say, that's not my lane, man. Call your county blight, your township blight officer.
I can tell you, we get that a lot
I
in the
bet you
administration
do.
office too. I can't find a mechanical permit for such and such a township.
Yeah.
Where do I go? Not here, but let me see if I can help you figure out who you need to talk
Just send it to the clerk's office.
We
Or 911,
we talked about that at the Board of Public Works with Jeff Van Bell, because we said, when people call us and ask us questions, he was talking about plumbing at the time, who is the authority for that? You know, so I thought that that was pretty interesting, Jeff.
Yeah, I think that email, I believe Hope sent that out, our sewer systems. She wanted to know, and there was no, so off the top of my head, looking at the county, I just started going down a list. Well, I know the sewer system here. Well, from my end, it gets even beyond that. We'll get a call, hey, I just tied in on a Paradise Lake Road. Who do I call for the final inspection? Who operates the system if there's a plug, or, you know what I mean? It gets a little confusing. The book that Monica puts out, that's right in my top drawer. So I, of course, like you said, man, I try to move them along. But if you step back for just, you know, that's easy to say, okay, Newburgh Township, it's Dovertine, call. You don't get a response, call me back and I'll rattle a cage. But the sewer and water, I'd like to see, you know, someday, Erica, maybe a layer that would have that, so we would know the areas of the county, because whatever Hope was applying for, you had to put this in here, and I know, Matt, you were on this email chain, we were all just dropping in information, she was quickly doing it, so just kind of food for thought. It'd be nice to know, one, where all that's at, the areas being serviced, and number two, who's operating those systems. We realize, you know, Dowagiac operates, but in our case down in Ottawa, we're using a private operator. Who is that? Is there an emergency contact number? You know, these types of things would be nice to have at the county level, just my 2 cents.
So with that said, township and cities and villages, I don't think nowhere in here or any MCLs
That's right.
say that when I get a phone call about Dowagiac or Pokagon or Howard Township,
That's right.
or Penn Township, or Newburgh Township, or Calvin Township, or Silver Creek Township, they're doing this in that township and I don't like it. There's nothing I can do. And if we pass a countywide ordinance, we know how well that went over. They can just tell us, you know, we're not gonna accept this. They can opt out. We have zero authority, unless I'm talking crazy.
No,
We have zero authority over townships, villages, and the city of Dowagiac.
it's true.
You know, unless it's a county funded, right? So this right here is as it represents the county, not,
Yep, yeah, I mean, unless it's an authority that's specifically delegated to the county, that's kind of how it works, is that, you know, townships and cities and villages have kind of the inherent authority to work through, basically, I think they call it health and welfare of its citizens. You know, so you can pass laws, as long as there's no conflicting state law, you can say, well, you can't have your weeds this high, or you do this, or you have to do this on Sundays, or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that you can do at that local level, that the county just can't. We can only legislate laws that are specifically spelled out in state law, and there's very few things the county is actually
very
permitted
few
to
things.
say. I mean, now, that's not to say you can't have some ordinances, like the ORV ordinance is a good example, but that's also a good example too of where local municipalities still always have the right to be able to say, no, we'll opt out.
Nah, we'll opt out.
You know, and so that makes it really hard. The only way that you really find those things to be really enforceable is if you get kind of a coalition of your townships together to say, yep, we want this. And I mean, there are some cases where that does make sense, but oftentimes, you know, if people are frustrated at the local level, it's talk to your township officials, talk to your village officials, and then obviously those folks are elected as well and have an obligation to their constituents in the same way.
I'll give you all an example. This weekend, they had a hot rod show and a barbecue for my best friend and my other friend, you know, and a lady that has known me literally all of my life, and she was in the area when I was born. Jeremiah, you the chair of the board? Yes, ma'am. You know, what you doing about that marijuana that's growing in my backyard? Ma'am, I can't do anything about that. Aren't you the county? Yes, but that's not, your job is worthless. That stung. And I tried to tell her, you know, and tried to explain to her what my actual job was, but at that point, didn't want to hear it. You know, so the public really don't know what we do.
No, they don't.
Really don't know. So I'm agreeing with Jeff Van Bell, put the information about the sewage and all that. maybe we should put more information on what our actual job is. And I don't want to tell people, like in the government, you get to run around the phone chain, or we will refer you to this place, refer you to that. I hate doing that, but I like to tell them. But at that point, they don't even want to hear it. They already have their mind made up what they want you to be able to do. You know, you just mad because I ain't doing what you want me to do. All right, off my
Is there an FAQ
soapbox.
section on our website that if somebody were to go on there to, like, if they had a specific question on a subject matter, it would direct them where to go?
We talked about that, about our internet thing. I don't think so.
There is, and
There
we're
is?
working on improving it right
All
now as
right.
part of the redesign.
So maybe we could have a suggestion thing on there and say, hey, we need more information on this. That'd be good.
Just,
You
so-
know?
yeah, like.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I can refer them, hey, look at the website. Click on my picture. This is my job. Your job is worthless. Yeah, well, run against me. Oops. Oh, statutory duties. Did we already cover that?
I think we did.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the main point of kind of the MCLs was that we had at the end there.
Yeah.
Was to really kind of, what are the powers of the board that are dictated by the state? And, you know, I mean, I know the one thing to keep in mind is there could be certain things like, I can't think of one offhand, but there may be other laws that are not specific to board of commissioners where there's something delegated to the board of commissioners that, hey, you're involved in this, whether that's certain planning things, and there are other things like that, but the primary list is here.
Yeah. All right. So the next bullet point is committees and agenda. And I've talked to a few of the commissioners, like the new ones, me, Roseanne, and Ryan, we have the majority of the workload. Your favorite chairman has 14 committees. You know, come next year or next election cycle or whatever, if we're all still here, I like to offload some of those committees because, you know, my position as chair specifically, I had no idea. Roseanne tried to warn me. A few people here tried to warn me what my position actually entails. It is more than you all think. You know, I am very active and I am very involved in this county. I've been told quite a few times to step back, and I have, you know, but then it's my job to know everything. And I try to disseminate that to everybody as much as possible. So committees, I put that on there, you know. Me and Sam had talked, and I hope you don't mind, I'm not gonna bust you out. We had talked about and this might be a budgetary thing, if some of these committees haven't been doing anything, because we've got a long list of committees. And I remember 2 years ago when me and Skip and them were looking through that, we didn't even know when they met, didn't even know what they did, didn't know who. So if they haven't done anything in the last year or two, no, we ain't making a decision now, but I'd like to relook at what's the value in that committee. And even if they ain't even doing nothing, what's the value in that committee? You know, and you know me and I don't like the knee-jerk things, but I like to take a deep dive into some of these committees, you know. They're just coffee clubs.
I think what I was specifically asking for was I was looking for potentially a new committee assignment, but I want to be involved in something that actually
Actually
seems
does
like we're
something.
doing something.
Yeah, because I've been on a few committees where the only thing we do is sit around and talk. Like, man, I could have done this by Zoom or phone. Send me an email. I just drove all the way to St. Joe or Benton Harbor or Kalamazoo, Battle Creek, Berrien County. Come on, man. What are we doing here? You know, especially if we're giving that committee money. If we're funding them and you ain't producing fruit, you need to get pruned. You know, that's just me. You know, but I have to assign people, and there's a few committees that I'm on that if I don't assign somebody, that they go away. You know, like the Southwest Michigan Community Action Agency. Nobody volunteered for that, so I took it. You know, we might want to take a look at that come next time around. Does anybody have anything about committees? Yes,
I'd
please.
say one thing, I guess a couple things, is that, you know, we've had a couple instances, I think, where we've had items that come up and, you know, we're looking at trying to figure out how do you approach something, right? And, you know, in a lot of ways, I think our standing committees were designed so that a lot of those kind of, you know, early projects kind of would funnel through those committees kind of gets sussed out and you figure out what all the details are, and then ultimately, when things are ready, you bring that recommendation to the board from the committee. And so, I mean, I think that's ultimately what the idea is behind a lot of those committees, is to have those be the place where you're kind of working through the early stages of things to get ultimately to a point where, you know, we've got a finished product, or what we think is a finished product, and we bring that forward. You know, so I would just encourage everyone, I think, and it's the board's decision really, but a good example of this would be with the agenda, kind of tying it to that, is that the agenda is, you know, overseen specifically by the chair. And items on the agenda can be added, if everybody, 2/3 of the people in attendance at a meeting vote to add an item to an agenda, from the committee, the whole, or any commissioner could add an item to the agenda. So, it's not to say if somebody isn't passionate about something, they couldn't say, you know, I'd like to be able to add this to the agenda, but I guess what I'm trying to encourage is that wherever possible, if we have a committee that is tasked with exploring that topic or, you know, that subject area, let's try to funnel those things into those committees and have them, that whatever the recommendation might be, you know, then flow into the committee of the whole and ultimately to the board. Because that's a much smoother process. If we circumvent the committees, it raises the question of what's the point of having a committee? You might as well just figure it out in committee of the whole.
You're dancing around it, I can come out and say it. If there's something that comes to me that wants to get put on the agenda, the first question I'm gonna ask is, did that go to the appropriate committee? If it did not, I'm not putting it on the agenda. Not gonna do it, don't have to. Now, if it did go to committee, my next question is gonna be, and I asked that to somebody, did this get voted on and passed? And the last one was like, no, but it was the consent of everybody. I had a hard time with that one, but I put it on the agenda. So, but anybody, any commissioner, not anybody, any commissioner can put things on the agenda. If it doesn't go through me to get it on the initial agenda, you can move to add this to the agenda before it's approved, right, RJ? So if there's something there that I asked you those two questions, you said no, or you didn't say nothing, I didn't put your thing on the agenda, before the agenda is approved, you move to add it to the agenda. That's your right. But that don't mean that I have to put it on the agenda. And then, once you move, it has to be seconded. Then after it's moved and seconded, have a discussion about it. I am gonna bring up that this was denied in the committee, or it was suggested, or it never did go to the committee. Then we're gonna vote on it. If it passes, I don't take it personal. It passes. And if it doesn't pass, don't take it personal as an attack on me or against me or from me. That's the rules that we put in place, and we gotta stick to them. You know, if not, what are we doing here? Why do we even have that committee? We should put everything in the committee of the whole at that point. You know, and get rid of all them committees except for the standing ones, and that would make me happy. Cause I'm on 14.
Some places do that. And I think Van Buren County recently whittled down their committees down to where, I mean, I think they do have a few select committees, but they do a lot more committee of the whole now than they used to. I mean, I'm not advocating for that at all.
No,
It's a
me
different
neither.
mechanism, but I'm just saying, I think that, much like we were saying, is that, you know, if we have a process, I think it's important that the board as a whole, you know, kind of adhere to that and say, yeah, we all agree this is the best way, and everybody kind of, you know, collaborates to say this is how we're going to approach it.
Because if we don't have
It's really up to the board
processes,
to decide those things.
yeah, if we don't have processes, we're gonna be accused like we were a few years ago of non-transparency, secret meetings, and all that other craziness. So we gotta do it. Two wrongs don't make it right, right? Or am I talking crazy?
Well, the other thing I wanted to note too is there was a few revisions that came up with the rules of procedure in the last year. I think they were revised about 3 times. And they were obviously committee of the whole. A few of those things, the revisions had to happen to account for those. But one of the changes that did happen was a while back, I think it was early in '22, the rules originally had it where the administrator was responsible for the agenda, and then I think later on in the rules, it also said, well, then the chairman is too, and it was really confusing.
It was.
We looked at a couple other counties and kind of changed things around, where it is the chair that makes the final call for what goes on the agenda and what doesn't. Pursuant to those three rules, where it's either from committee of the whole, 2/3 vote of commissioners present, or, each commissioner could add something. And so I just wanted to remind everybody too that, we work together all the time.
Every day.
Every time an agenda comes up, hey, here's everything that's on it, here's what I've gotten, is there anything that's a problem, we work through that, but if we do get something where, especially if it's after the agenda goes out, I'm working with Jeremiah to say, hey, what do you think, is this something you wanna do an amendment, how do we do this, but Jeremiah ultimately has the final call on those things.
And that's when I started making phone calls and doing my own research, because I just don't take Matt's, because I was accused of, he's running my show. He does not. He will tell you that I am very strongly opinionated, if y'all couldn't tell. No. So are you saying that once somebody does move and it gets put on the agenda, I can put that back in committee? Did you say that?
It does actually say in the rules that the chair does have the authority to take matters that may arise and assign those to committees. That's in the rules.
Sure.
But I think specifically, what I was trying to get at is, as we draft the agenda, we get items from elected officials.
Then put it in the committee,
You and I
right there.
we go over it.
Right.
It's where we've had some struggles is after the agenda comes out, and we get into that kind of interim phase, our rules now say any final changes have to be submitted by Wednesday, if there's any amendments. Well, we get into that kind of gray area where it's like, okay, the agenda's already been posted, something comes in, how do we approach this? And I normally, work with you, hey, this came up, can we add this? But any commissioner can still add something right up to the point the meeting starts.
Yeah, that's happened before.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with the grants that we just talked about, that's happened several times, last minute.
And I would say, looking at things like the committees, for example, a lot of that I think rests upon the board itself. If somebody adds an item, they have the right to be able to do that and say, hey, I'd like to add this. The board as a whole also has the right to be able to say, no, we don't want to have that on here right now. Did it follow this process or that? So that really all falls back on, self-regulation, essentially.
Yeah, we as a board, even as floor members, we can refer items to the committee, and we can also appeal you if you try and do it. If you say, I'm just gonna do this,
Right.
I can appeal you, and then if we all vote in the majority as far as against your decision, then it stays.
Yeah, yeah.
So we do have that power just to tell him no too, and it's no offense.
I get it, brother. Please keep me in
So
check,
it's not,
because I could
like
get out of
it's an
hand.
all-powerful thing where
Right,
you can just do
right.
it. If you disagree, and the majority of us here do, we can just appeal his
There's
decision.
still only one vote.
Yeah.
Would it be beneficial then to, let's say we have resolutions in the packet, we got a cover letter that stated those facts, right? Now we're asking the question of who brought the topic forward, when was it brought up, did it go to a committee, what was the committee's recommendation on it? And that way it could cut down a lot of the questions.
That way it's already there for everybody to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, you're pointing out who put it forward, what was the reason for it, did it travel through committee?
Did it pass?
Committee's recommendation, and that could be like the beginning step before it gets to the CAL, then before it gets to the BLC.
Yeah, and then once it gets on the agenda, that cover letter is still with that resolution or motion. Are you saying that?
Yeah, just to keep things more transparent,
Yeah.
I think it would be stated.
That puts work on him.
Well, we do that generally.
He's got that form now, just
Yeah.
has these
Yeah.
very minimally revised.
Yeah.
We do make that available to our, any of the elected offices, department heads. That's something we've sent that out before. We usually put the from is who it's from, so you'll notice if it's appointments committee, it'll say from appointments committee. And if it's a committee thing, we do this committee reviewed these items, so the last meeting was a good example. We had a couple policy changes, appointments. It did actually say the appointments committee reviewed this, policy committee recommended these changes. So we've been trying to do that for any of those items where we have that, that information available.
I'm just kinda thinking like a real standard, simple form, just check the box,
Yeah, I'm agreeing with that. You got more work to do.
I got a couple of things to say.
Yes, ma'am.
if it's okay, committees, okay. So we have what I consider internal committees, salary, policies, surplus property, appointments committee.
Mhm.
Those are
The standard
county,
committee.
standard committee. Then we have all of these other committees. And those other committees, in my mind, they fall into three categories. Number one is statutory, okay? And the planning commission is an example of that. Another one is oftentimes their bylaws or how they were formed require a commissioner. And I can use Southwest Michigan Planning Commission as an example of that, because they specifically say and Nats does too, who are
Woodlands
supposed to be
also.
on those committees.
Woodlands
okay?
also does that.
And Woodlands, you're right, and Woodlands is statutory,
Mhm.
absolutely. So, and then the other one is kind of like a traditional one. And as an example, I serve on Human Services Coordinating Council. That's more of a traditional, it's not my understanding that it is statutory. Carol, am I right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
They have their own bylaws and
Yes.
stuff that say stuff.
Yeah, but yet, and then I see, and I have the agenda of the committee as a whole, we have committee reports. So in my mind, those are the committees, either internal or like HSCC or Health Department or something like that. Then it says district reports under it. Now that was a change, and I don't know how that got changed, because it was always committee reports and it went by district. I don't ever recall, maybe at the end of the meeting when it was board member, you might mention something that was going on in your district. And I guess I would like to know how everybody else feels about that.
We changed that at our last workshop at MEC.
Oh, okay, see, and
That's when
that's the
we-
one I
that's when
wasn't
we
able,
changed
yeah,
it,
I
yeah.
wasn't able to attend. So, okay,
Missed it
so
by
now
one
this
vote.
means that not only do I give committee reports, but then I give district reports as well. Okay, so that's two different reports.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you for clarifying that,
Yeah.
because I never did understand how that got changed.
Yeah, that was the idea, was that, for whether it was standing committees or, the boards and commissions that commissioners are on, that you could give an update on, here's what's going on with policy
Okay.
committee or, capital projects.
Sure.
Here's human
Okay.
service, whatever it is that you're on.
I got it.
And then if somebody wanted to say, here's something going on in my district, you could kind of separate those things out a
I get
little
it.
bit.
Yeah, okay, good to know. Especially since I was the only one that didn't know that.
Anything else on that one?
You should have asked.
I am now.
All right, moving on to committee of the whole, I put that one on there, just because when we first started the committee of the whole, I don't think we need process functions, but it's mainly the feedback, and we gotta talk about the consent agenda, but we said when we first initiated this that we'd take another look at it. Has it been about 90 days or so, or a little bit more? Take another look at it to see if, is it actually working? Do we wanna keep it? Any improvements we need to put on that?
I would like to keep it.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to discuss, and we can have interaction with, actually, I like the feedback from
Yeah,
there
yeah,
too.
because we get more information.
Right,
That way, by the time it gets to the consent agenda, that's why we got a consent agenda. It's done. We already talked about it, but I just would like for the commissioners, a lot of times, we bring something up and there's no discussion, no nothing, but then it looks like people still have questions, so I'm encouraging people, ask as many questions as possible. That way, when your constituents ask you, then you got a answer for them.
Yeah, I personally for myself, there's moments where I just have to let it sink in, and it's not until a day or two later.
Yeah,
And that's where I think it works well, because I still have that opportunity between the committee of the whole meeting and our board meeting, then to follow up on any questions that I might have. In a perfect world, I would probably get everything answered in the committee of the whole meeting, but it just doesn't come to me at that moment.
yeah, I'm that way too, especially when somebody comes at me.
I'm gonna have
3 hours later, I'm like, dang it, I should have said this.
But it definitely is helping speed up the second meeting, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
help speed that up.
That's its function, but its main function and the main reason I was for the committee of the whole, at first I wasn't. But then like you said, a couple days later, I'm like, that's a good idea. you know, but I like it mostly because of the interaction. And so with consent agenda, I want to bring up that we've already talked about it, but 3 days later, if there's a question, we can pull it.
Yes.
Any one of the commissioners here, and it doesn't have to even be voted on. One commissioner can say, if you got a question, I want, before it's approved, I want this pulled and put in the new business.
Yeah, yeah,
That way we can have more discussion for those,
yeah.
oh man, I should have said, or I should have asked, you know what I mean, and get more clarification.
Yeah.
But if you know about that, maybe like if one of the elected officials puts, it's one of the things there, maybe ask them to come so they can expound more, so it all don't lay on Matt. You know, we
Okay.
need the person that's the author of it, come and speak again and ask that question, you know, in public, you know.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, then what it then allows us to do is be able to, if a couple days later something were to come up, or I get a call from the elected official,
Yeah.
and my view kind of maybe changes on it, or whatever might happen,
Mm-hmm.
it allows us to be able to speak
Mhm.
again.
Yeah, yeah, because your view, if you've got a question, somebody else might have that same question and this never came to them, and then that could change the whole outcome of that whole thing.
So at the beginning of the meeting, then, you would have to ask for that item to be removed from the consent agenda.
Yes,
Moved under new business.
Yes.
And that's before the agenda is approved.
yes.
And that, yeah, it doesn't have to be voted on. That's all.
And it don't even have to be voted on.
Okay.
Then just ask, yeah,
And you only need one commissioner to have it and
yeah.
done. And then we vote on it and vote as amended. Think- Yeah, go ahead.
I'm fine with the committee of the whole, and kind of seems to me that every one gets better as we go along. We almost seem like we're fine tuning it as we go along. Because I think when we started out, it was a little sketchy, but it seems to be rolling along pretty good. But what about you all? What do you think? Monica, what do you think about the consent agenda? I mean, the
Committee of the whole.
committee of the whole.
It's a lot of work for me, but, you know, it's,
Because of the extra minutes?
yeah, the minutes are a lot more work than regular meetings. So, but it is what it is.
And all of our meetings are being recorded and televised.
Right, but we still have to have a written record.
Yeah.
Right, but don't we get to set the tone on what's entailed in the minutes outside of statutory?
Yeah, and, you know, if we want to discuss that, we met and discussed on regular meetings, so if we wanted to cut down on committee of the whole, we could discuss that as well.
Mm.
If they're being broadcasted and videotaped, and our minutes don't have to be ordered for, I know they're not ordered for it
No,
now,
they're
but
not.
they don't have
Not
to be
even close.
greatly detailed if the things are being recorded.
Are you saying it's more work because the meetings are lasting longer, or?
So regular board meetings are pretty simple because it's business. You have somebody makes a motion, seconds it, we have the language, and then motion usually carries. So it's pretty straightforward, whereas workshops, committee of the whole, it's a lot of narrative, and I get nervous because I don't want to paraphrase or misconstrue what somebody says. So that's just what makes them more difficult. Paraphrasing is tough.
Mm. And
So
you have
always
to
pay
be,
attention to your minutes that we're about.
Yes, read your
We're
minutes.
about to pass before you pass them.
and Robert Benjamin was good at that, for misspelled names or misquotes, he'd
Not
like,
that I did it all.
no, and it wasn't you, it was something that we had in the thing that he,
Yeah, no.
yeah.
No, yeah, please read your minutes here.
I'm just spitballing here, but is there a way to just have, it automatically transcribed?
That's what I was just about to say. YouTube has that feature. You can automatically transcribe it.
Mm.
Somebody didn't have to look it over and make sure it's not a mess, but it's there.
We have people that mumble though.
Yeah.
It ain't me.
I would say it'd be worth having us take a look at
We can maybe
Yeah.
discuss it.
revising
Yeah.
the Cal minutes.
And that would be the policy committee, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And speaking of minutes, we had a thing for public comment. Somebody was angry that we didn't include their packet into the minutes. We don't have to do that. Only thing you take minutes for is
We
what,
discussed that, and that's important.
what we say, yeah. Yeah, cause that, once we allow that, that's a
It would be,
slippery
it
slope.
would be uncommon to have a member of the public admit something in the official minutes of
Yeah.
a local government body of any kind.
You don't tell us what to do.
People do ask that. They do
Yeah, they
ask
do.
that. They
Oh,
do
yeah.
at the townships.
Just
I want
twice,
these in the minutes.
twice here that I know of, you know, and they were controversial.
There's certainly no requirement to do that.
All right. I think that's it that I have. Anybody else for this topic?
So we should put that on our policy.
Oh.
Yeah, I
was
got it
gonna
written
add
down.
One thing real quick.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we talked about, I think Vice Chair Whalen was gonna do this potentially anyway, but we're gonna look at this in the policy committee, is one of the things I would say, I think it's worked well, is we've modeled this off of other counties that were doing this, was moving those discussion items as they've been approved, that they move to the consent agenda for their regular meeting. But one of the things we talked about was having some mechanism to read what those are, rather than I move the above listed items, to actually say M12223 is a motion to do this, R123 is a resolution to do that, so that there doesn't have to be discussion, but at least the items that are being considered for
Yes.
the consent agenda are
Right.
being,
Yeah.
listed out, in the
Yeah, I
meeting.
like that. That's a good idea.
So I planned on talking about that.
Can somebody holler at Dave and tell him to grab some food before he leaves?
He was just getting the water.
Okay.
Oh,
Just check. Sorry for running out of it. Knew there was food.
Victor's over there still eating? Come on, man.
Round two.
That
Yeah,
might
there
be
you
three.
go.
Right, you're right.
I'm
There
gonna
you
talk
go.
about him when he comes back in here.
Yeah, so I was planning the next policy committee meeting to take a few examples and work through that and formalize it.
that's a
I mean, I don't
good
think we
idea.
have to,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be in the rules per se to do it, but it'd be a good idea, I think, to look at something like that.
Do other counties include, like, say, resolutions and motions within the consent agenda?
Mhm.
They do?
Yeah, I mean, it's handled a little differently. Van Buren County, for example, they do list them a little bit separate from, like, say, the minutes and things, but what they do is they put an asterisk next to those items and then say,
Oh, okay.
these items or anything with this asterisk is considered. I mean,
Okay.
I've looked at it, I thought that was a bit confusing, because you have to
It
look
is
through what
confusing,
has an asterisk and what doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, just putting it all in that consent agenda area, I thought made
Mm-hmm.
more sense, but.
I was approached, I'm glad you brought that up, Roseanne, 'cause I almost forgot it. You do the consent agenda, and I was asked that instead of going, yep, this is the consent agenda, I moved it all listed items on the consent agenda, and I forget the rest.
voted on it
He
one
voted
time?
on by one time, unanimous roll call vote, you know? But I've been approached, and it's a good idea that person not, like if it's a resolution, don't read the R111111 subject, and then read the whole resolution, because that defeats the whole purpose of the consent agenda, but read each item. That way it might spur somebody, oh, I did have a question, I want to move that one to new business.
So by the time we get to that.
By the time
point,
you get to, you can't move it anymore.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so is that even an option just to read, do we need to read each one? Because we can
Or
read
the
ourselves,
We used to read just the titles.
just read the title.
That's all I'm gonna do is just read the title.
Yeah.
Hey, this is a motion, this is what it's about, hey, this is a resolution.
Yeah, yeah,
Hey, this is just something we have to do statutorily.
And
yeah.
that's something we can look at in the rules too. I mean.
The big thing is just pay attention to your agenda when it's published.
Yeah.
Take 5 minutes, read through it. If you have any serious questions,
'Cause I know
do your
people,
best not to forget before the meeting.
yeah.
I mean,
Write
I
it
think
down.
You could probably address it in the rules and say, basically, there's no debate on consent agenda items. At any time, if the commissioner says, actually, I need to talk about this, like, it can move, I mean. I don't
Yeah, if
know
somebody
you-
made a motion to move it, I don't think anybody's
I don't
gonna
know
doubt
that
that.
you would have to necessarily have that come at a specific time. If you get to the consent agenda and somebody says, I want to take that off, I mean, I think we've seen that in the past with minutes or things, in the previous board where that happened around that time when the consent agenda was approved. So I mean, I think you can address that in the rules however the board would see fit, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
I think the main thing is just making sure you go through your agenda, all of it, and read everything.
Nobody here, but
Some of
there's,
those are quite long.
yeah, some people.
Well, I know, but
yeah.
still, if you do it, I don't know, when you're talking about it, then I recall some of the stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, that's in there, that, I recall
it being in there and you just, or if I do have a question, then I'll write it in my little book, so at the meeting I can say, oh yeah.
Yeah. I've heard from other commissioners from other counties that they don't even read their agenda till the day of.
Oh, we've had commissioners like that.
I didn't want to say that, but
We have
I've had both.
several.
The items on the consent agenda are items that we spoke about at the.
Already at the
At
cow.
town, right.
It would never be the case that there would be an item on the
No,
consent agenda.
no.
Yeah, they're all items that are ready for
Right.
formal movement.
Right.
Yeah, if anything, at a regular meeting were to come up that was not previously discussed at committee of the whole, would automatically go under new business.
Yeah. That'd be bad news.
Yeah,
Somebody-
there's qualifying marks to make it to the consent agenda.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be sneaky and unethical. All right, that was a good one. Glad it was you all's idea to put that on there. Anything else? RJ, you're looking at me like you got a question.
No.
That's very, you mean mugging me, man?
No.
You give me the stink eye?
I finally have one of those.
No, you
Easy
don't.
going.
Yeah. All right, so what we're all here for, item number 6, I've got a statement for this, but we're gonna read this. It's for the fiscal year 24 budget, BOC guidance and process, revenues, indirect costs, collection of fees, long-term options, realistic versus worst-case scenarios. So, I'm gonna start and open this up by saying the elected officials and Carol have given us their projected budgets. You know, oh boy, she's gonna get me word for word. I'll talk slow. You all have given us your projected budgets. Our deficit with that projected budget is $3.5 million, right? 3.4, 3.4, yeah, 3.4 million, 3.4 million. So I would like you all to, because you're all asking for our guidance. So my guidance would be, I would like you all to take another look at it and get it as close to zero. Because to zero, I think that's not realistic. You know, that's unrealistic. But get it as close to zero as you all can without cutting any positions. Not vacant positions. How do I say it?
Currently staffed.
Currently staffed positions, without cutting any currently staffed positions. Now, if they're vacant, they ain't been filled, then that's a whole nother story, you know? And I would like to see that, you know, because what do we have to have this done by the end of the fiscal year? And this is pretty important, you know, I'd say in the next couple of weeks. I don't know, how long did it take you all to do the first one? How long does that take?
For everybody to meet with you, Jen, what was that, month?
We had 3 weeks straight worth of meetings, gave them about 2 weeks to enter revenues, 2 weeks to enter expenditures, another week on staffing, so I think it was spread out. I think the calendar was about 5 or 6 weeks. I don't know if everybody would wanna meet with us again, or if they can find areas. I think that would be up to everybody, cause that is a lot of meeting, a lot of time.
Yeah.
If they kind of just know. And I don't know how much they'll be playing with revenues, but if they're trying to cut, some grants are fully reimbursable 100%, some are not, and have a matching component. And so maybe they wanna reduce the ones that have matching components, that would affect the revenue a little bit in those. Other grants, it wouldn't affect it at all.
So we need something, a realistic timeline, and I don't have no idea what that would be, because I don't know, you know, I don't know their jobs, you know.
I think realistically, to look at some areas that they know that they could trim down per se and go make adjustments, it could probably be done within a week or two. I don't know, you'd have to ask them, but I mean, as far as entering numbers.
Well, they're all here except for Vic. Vic!
He's on the farm.
So,
I don't know if this works, but, you know, we had a preliminary budget, you know, maybe if everybody takes a look, you know, and goes through and says, you know, is there any areas where we can find room to cut this or to, you know, revise this a different, you know, even if it's looking at revenues and we're really honing in, did we get this right? We could maybe look to have an update, say, hey, you know, we took another shot at it. Here's our version, again preliminary, but something new. Maybe around that July 6th timeframe for the next BOC meeting. I mean, obviously it wouldn't be an agenda item per se, but to have, I mean, could be,
Right.
but,
Could be.
you know, to have it be, hey, you know, here's a second shot at trying to see, you know, with trying to refine things a little more. This is where we're at now.
All right, a little more update.
Would that be agreeable in any way?
If it's 2 weeks from today.
Is that enough?
I don't know, I'm seeing some stinky, hairy eyeballs back there.
Well, you addressed that at the beginning to whom again? The beginning of your letter. It was to.
All right, so the beginning of what I just said, I said that, you all, I didn't address it to anybody,
I
so.
heard you say elected
Elected
officials.
Elected officials and Carol. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
because
I guess I
admin
don't
has a
know.
lot more employees than I do, so I just want to make sure that they, you know, part of that review would have to be admin as well,
Oh, of course.
right? But he just didn't say that, that's why I wanted to point
All
out. If you
departments.
could
Let
remind
me, and department heads, especially admin, you know, especially administration, because he's my direct employee. I don't control y'all. Him, I didn't say it because I figured that goes with us, but absolutely, as close to zero as possible, Matt.
So all department heads and elected officials.
Elected official department heads. and
Yeah, my
admin.
bad, I'm sorry.
Admin's a department, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I apologize.
Just wanted to clarify. I knew that was the case, but it didn't.
And
didn't
Carol
say.
Wheeler.
And
Well, she's
chief
appointed.
judges.
No, she's elected.
You got elected?
elected.
I thought you were appointed by the governor. Or
I
something.
was originally, but I was on
Oh,
the ballot.
I'm
She must
sorry.
not have voted for me.
Well, you were you ran unopposed, so I had to.
I'm only kidding. I wasn't trying to, say anything. I just wanted some clarification. When you say, so is admin's gonna reopen the columns where it's the department recommended? Is that what you're saying would happen?
I don't know. I don't know nothing about that.
Yeah,
We
just
would
to
reopen
see if there's
the department
any
recommended
movement.
column, is that what we would do?
They're not locked, but yes.
So
Okay.
we update the same column.
And then I just wondered if there's any, the reason, you're right, my face was like, because we've got all our performance reviews scheduled, and so there's appointments for all that, and my court schedule, which I realize I can work nights, but I'm gone next week at my judicial training, so I have to go to that. So the 6th is really tight because of that.
That wasn't my suggestion. It was earlier, but
So-
I'm like, yeah, that ain't really. Ooh.
I would be asking for realistically until the 14th of July, because I'm gonna have to meet with all of my different courts, but,
That's even better yet.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's better
so,
yet. Yeah.
I'm not trying to be like asking for a lot, but I
Well,
just
that's
need
why
a
I
little
threw it out
time.
there, because I have no
When
idea.
we have public
Yeah.
Yeah, just to keep in mind, I think, and it's not that we couldn't do special meetings too if we need to,
Mhm.
but the budget would have to be passed before September 30th. And the other key would be is that for any, budget act, you would have to have a public hearing that happens, so that has to be scheduled in advance.
Mhm.
There is a timeline for that. I think I can't remember if it's 7 days or 10 days, but you're really shooting for, we usually try to shoot for the end of August, early September timing. You could probably push it back to that middle part of September timing. But that's essentially what we have
That's
left in terms of trying to
cutting
figure
it
this out.
close, I
It
think.
gets presented, it sits in Monica's office for public review, we have a public hearing, all of that has to happen. And so there's definitely some timing, we can't push this to the very end either. So I just wanna say we need to be careful on pushing back too much as well. Just make sure we're finding an even balance. I'm not saying that the 14th wouldn't work or that Carol said, I'm explaining the other side of it too. We don't wanna wait too long and get into a position where we can't get this passed before year end.
So the 14th is good.
Sam's got a.
I was just gonna say real quick, I'm speaking for myself, I'll be as flexible as possible as far as special meetings and things of that nature. I know RJ and I spoke about for the following year, maybe trying to get something more concrete in a sense of series of meetings so we can kind of get ahead of this and not be so rushed at the end. But to get this one done this year, I would be as flexible as possible.
Well, and I assume that the deadline we're talking about, I mean, if we go back in and cut everything we think we can cut, I mean, then if that's not enough for what all you all want, then you'll have to tell us what else to cut, I mean.
Well, we'll do that
So-
before the end of the deadline where we're stuck like Jen said, but we want to give you all the opportunity
Yeah,
to
no,
tell
I
us
get it.
what you need, because we don't work there.
Well.
No, and I get it, and I mean, I feel like I mean, I don't know how Matt and Jen feel about it, but I mean, we brought a lot of information and tried to, provide a lot of details about everything, so that they would know where we were coming from, so we're certainly willing to go back in and work on it again, but,
I mean, I can speak on my behalf, I didn't ask, I mean, mine didn't go up a ton. I'm not gonna be able to cut a ton, so just to give you fair warning, I don't wanna waste a ton of time. I didn't increase line items.
So maybe
I
that
don't
don't,
know,
And-
I'm just being
maybe it don't
completely
apply to you.
honest.
well,
Since we're talking about.
and I mean, we didn't really
timelines.
know, I think when we met, but I think most of the wages and fringes, but I mean, most of our costs are in the wages and fringes. There are areas we can go back and look at, but I wasn't being sarcastic when I said it wasn't in paper clips and staples. I was trying to say, like, the biggest increases are in wages and fringes,
My
so.
training budget is like $1,000, so, what can
So,
I shave
well-
off of that? And, I talked with Jen about it, and. we
maybe
were
it don't
talking-
apply to you,
Well, I mean, I don't know about all the offices, but I just wanna to honestly say, if we're looking at our budgets, I don't know how much this is really gonna help. If we're gonna wait for all of us to do this, is it gonna be worth it? I mean, we can, I just wanna be honest.
And it was brought up also that we could have, I don't know if we have enough time for it, but have a budget committee. That way that person, that committee could look into like yours specifically, yeah, we're gonna leave that one alone. Look into Carol's, oh, we can find something here. Look into Hope's, yeah, leave that one alone. Sheriff, oh, well, maybe this, maybe not that, you know what I mean?
We've done that, the full board has done it, committee's done it, like they've had work set, it's been done. Roseanne, you've been here a long time.
Was it any good?
Sometimes
It's
it's
all in how accountable
Yeah.
you wanna hold people.
Yeah.
Administration's done it with departments before, where admins told departments, hard line, times are hard, you have to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and this is it. So, I mean, Sheriff, you've seen a little bit more than I've been here 20 years, you've been here longer.
Couple things, just, so we had this email go out earlier this week, and there was a little controversy over it, but I think it brings out a lot of points. So my road patrol budget is going up around $800,000. 300 and some thousand of that is just murders, so we identified that. Majority of that is wages. There's a little bit of other things in there that we could cut and bring down, but it just comes down to, those are the major items that do it, so it comes down to cutting people. Plain and simple. And then you start having an effect, if you cut too many, it affects other things. So I have a secondary road program that I gotta have a maintenance of effort, I believe it's 13 officers for the road patrol. That doesn't include everything else. So they gotta be assigned to road patrol duties, not contracts or other things. So that can affect that. That also affects training dollars and how much you get in training dollars to come back, because we have to match, the county has to match X amount of $3,000 a year, so I can get $6,000 a year from the state. So these are all things that when you start playing with the numbers, it becomes a little more difficult. But I think identifying where the biggest issues are. The other thing that comes up is the fact that we're gonna have money coming back from this year's budget, as far as I can tell. I don't know about, I know from my personal budget, there's gonna be some money coming back.
Yeah.
Because I've had vacant positions. The other thing I wanted to mention is that you talked about if it's a vacant position, let's not fill it. We went through freezing times and stuff like that. But I do have positions that are statutorily mandated to have in the jail that we can't cut.
And the
You gotta
courts that we
23
have
people
statutory
working
do
in
that we
jail,
can't
and
mess with.
I have some vacancies in there, so that's just another thing to keep in mind when we're talking about that, so. But it's just, identifying what the big pieces are. You take the big chunks out, and then you find out where you go from there. But that's the big one that I saw was, in my road patrol, because there's still DV, I assume. I don't know for a fact, but they went up significantly. Where the jail went up, but not nearly as much, and it's about the same amount of people, right?
There's a lot of legacy debt costs, and that's probably what you're seeing, that was the largest increase, as well as people who switched over to the DC. Those, a lot of times, depending on which union groups they are and such, remember there's about 9 of them plus non-union. Some of them are scheduled to go up 1%. So you're seeing those increased costs as well as wages are going up, and it's a percentage of wages.
I think everybody's getting 3% wages, by contracts, I should say.
Yeah.
The union contracts, there we go. And then even the non-union are guaranteed
Yes.
from this,
Agreement.
which is unheard of, so. So those are all 3% wage increases automatic according to contract. So.
That's what we didn't know, what you said about if this position here isn't filled, it affects this position, that position, that position, that position.
You can.
Judge Beeler, elected Judge Beeler.
Nonpartisan though.
Nonpartisan Judge Beeler, so I did vote for you probably. I'm just messing.
This is being recorded.
Yeah, I'm just messing.
Should've wore boots.
No, so she gave me a flow chart that was amazing. It had her, then I remember Sarah Matthews, and then the probate court, circuit court, the other court, you know, and everything, and it had everybody's position there. And Vic sent me one after a little bit of battle that we can see what affects, you know, and I think we have that for everybody now. So if it comes down to it, we all as commissioners can look at that and see how changes or freezes or whatever will affect each department, because I think we have that for everybody's office now. That is huge, you know, that gives us some kind of picture and faces even to the picture, you know, the big picture of what we do, how it affects everything, you know.
The charts are there, but the names have been changed to protect.
Yes.
Right.
If I could, I'll share some of the brainstorm ideas that some of the elected officials came up with.
Well, she's handing it out. I withdraw my request for it to be the 14th. I can make the 6th work, so if that's what other people agree to.
14.
No, I'm just saying, like,
Just leave
I'll.
14, that way
Yeah.
everybody's got-
Okay,
Yeah,
well, I wasn't
14th
trying
is
to be
great.
the one being a holdout, so.
Yeah, 14th is great.
You got the holiday in there and people have vacation scheduled.
Yeah,
Yeah.
14th is great.
I do.
Thank you.
Anybody else? We have plenty.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You didn't?
Oops. I didn't.
Vic, your name ain't on here, man.
What's that?
Your name ain't on here.
Ooh, he was.
Oh, I am out of the hot seat now.
I was doing some family matters last week, so I wasn't out here.
All
right.
Got forgotten.
All right. I'm glad that happened. That way I'm out of the hot
Maybe he
seat
was
now.
eating.
Yeah, I was out of state, attended to some family matters, but was on the phone listening to the conversation.
You have the floor, sir.
Periodically contributing, but just some things that are fairly similar to what you've already heard. And I've been doing this as an elected official for 20 years now, so I've certainly gone through a lot of different stages, a lot of phases, a lot of things that have been talked about. And so, you hear the phrase, "There's nothing new under the sun," and that's to some degree true. But there is obviously a challenge that's been pointed out and why you're having this meeting. But just to point out a few things, like the other budgets and so forth, we don't have a lot of, if any, discretionary spending or surpluses and so forth. It's mostly wages and benefits that we have. And we've, over the years, we have cut that back. If you look at where we were probably, when I started in 2003 with some of the things like travel and so forth, those things are probably a half to maybe even less than that as far as what it was when I first got here. There are just the realities too that some of the functions that we provide, if we have to cut employees, which again is certainly, I'm sure, an option that,
That's
you know.
twice you all have brought that up.
Yeah.
Every time you all bring up that, I'm gonna point it out.
Well, I'm pointing it out because I don't want to do it, but I just want to point out why it's not a good idea to do that.
We're not suggesting that.
And I really do appreciate that from the chair as well as everybody else, but
It's
just.
never been mentioned.
Never.
Never been mentioned it. And we keep hearing it.
And
but
well-
Never mentioned it.
We just want to make sure that, you know, that we don't, the unspoken word sometimes, you know,
You
weighs
won't
heavy.
get that from me. Absolutely not. I say what's on my mind right up front.
Yeah, well,
That
this is
not
something
on
that
my
you can
mind.
maybe add your quiver then as far as if somebody from the community says, well, you should do this and so forth. This is why you don't want to do it. For instance, like if I have to cut attorneys, what'll happen is that I've got to make tough decisions. Do we stop doing district court and we just concentrate on the felonies and so forth because we don't have the personnel to do it? And then you see, you know, shriveling up of dollars coming from, fines and costs and so forth. And I'm very reassured because you don't want to do that. That means we won't have to go down that road. But if there are unfortunately consequences when cuts like that do happen. I will mention, because we're all trying to find ways to help out. One of the things that has never been done in Cass County in terms of grants, we've got a couple grants in my office, but one that has never been done, including before I got here, was having a grant for the abuse neglect cases. It's a very cumbersome, arduous, time-intensive thing to do, and that's, I think, part of the reason why probably my predecessor didn't do it, and, well, we've never done it. But we just, as I've told Jennifer and I told Matt at our meeting, that's something we've just got to do, and that'll bring in, potentially $20,000 to $50,000, as well. So that's just, stay tuned for the details, but that'll we expect will help some too. Also, like some of the other departments, because we've had just such a challenge filling positions, we're going to have a lot of savings, as we always have. In the 20 years I've been here, we've had 1 year that we were over budget, and that was I think it was $1,000 over budget. But I keep track of these dollars and so forth. And prior to this year, in the 20 years I've been the elected prosecutor, we've saved about well over $250,000 in the budget savings each year. I think it's actually closer to $500,000. I'll get you those numbers. And this year, it's going to be the largest ever. And I won't get too aggressive in the predictions, but certainly you're not going to see overspending this year like you have not seen that in previous years, and you're not going to see that this year when the budgets get concluded for this fiscal year. So just wanted to point those things out for you. So.
All right. I don't know if this is you or I've heard that we've had money out there that hasn't been collected. Is there some money anywhere around?
There is some, and a couple of our grants are lagging in the collection. We expect we'll get that. We're working with the grant. We've had some new people in those positions, again, because we keep having to hire new people, and so they're learning how to do that and so forth. So and Jennifer, has worked with our office, including helping us to focus on where that is and so forth, but we expect that money will be collected. We're working on that currently right now, so.
And last meeting, a member of the public, I believe, asked us, or somebody asked us, why we weren't using people on the road, chain gangs and nothing like that. That's because those people haven't been charged, right?
Well, I think you had asked the sheriff, that would be in his bailiwick. There's plenty of people in the jail, still, but I don't think.
We can't use them if they haven't been sentenced.
You've got plenty of people that have been sentenced in Cass County. That continues to happen.
Just a quick, I can bridge that a little bit. So it takes a minimum of 8 people, of inmate workers, to run the jail and save the county money, not to have to pay people to make food, clean the facility, and things like that. I only have 12 people eligible for that. The other 4 you don't want to have in there because there's only 12 sentenced inmates of the 94 that are in jail right now.
Only 12 sentenced?
Only 12 sentenced.
And let me speak to that a little bit. You got to keep in mind, though, it depends also, and I don't want to disparage, any of the judiciary, but if nobody's been sentenced to jail, there's not going to be many people in the jail. They're getting sentenced, but they're not going to jail, if that makes any sense. If you have 100 people.
It doesn't.
Well, it should, because if there's 100 people that are sentenced, and we'll take 2 different judges. One judge is 80 of them go to jail, then you've got 80 people to choose from. If a different judge sentences 100 people and 5 of them go to jail, you've got 5 people to choose from. So it does make sense.
But not in our current situation.
Yeah, it does, because
The way
that,
you're stipulating it makes sense, but in our current given situation, it doesn't make
He
sense.
just said there's 12.
12 of the 90.
yeah, well, that was just a hypothetical, I'm not saying that, but.
That aren't sentenced,
Yeah, so
that
your
we're
example
treating
perfectly
and
makes
taking
sense.
care of.
Yeah. And just very frankly, under previous judges, and again, this is no, judges elected by the people, and you got, I respect that and so forth, but under previous judges, circuit court judges, more people went to jail than what's happening right now. Out of your, the higher percentage will go to jail.
So when more people go to jail, our costs go up and we spend more money.
That's the downside of it.
But there's
But-
94 people in there right now, right?
How do we
How do you
collect,
utilize the
how do we
94
collect state
people?
fees from inmates? Or do we collect them?
I don't think he can answer that.
No, that's not my,
Sorry, I was looking at
yeah,
the sheriff.
go ahead, Sheriff.
No,
Yeah.
the other, our biggest problem right now is it takes so long for people to get to trial and then get sentenced. It used to take 3 to 5 weeks to sentence somebody. The probation department would get what's called a pre-sentence report. It would take 3 to 5 weeks for them to process that pre-sentence report, then the person would be sentenced to jail, then they would spend that time. That time frame is now 18 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And it's so high.
Do that math, that 15 weeks, if you go to the 3, 13 weeks if you go to the 5, multiply that times $65 a day, and that's money that's just going right out the door,
Yeah.
because those people would be sentenced, and potentially we could charge the state, and that's why our rentals went down so much. I explained this to Matt and Jen just recently as well. So our rentals went down tremendously the last 2 years because of that 18-week time frame that the probation department is demanding to have. In the past, the judges have asked to have that reduced. And the probation department could get it reduced, but they're so short-staffed at the probation department, so it's all hand in hand here. So it takes longer to get to court and get through the case, then it takes longer. So what happens at the end of all that time? Time served. They're not coming to jail because it's time served, because they've spent all this time that could have been paid into our rentals. Because what we do is when we get somebody sentenced to jail, they can fall into a category where we can be reimbursed from the state for that. If they get sentenced to 1 year in jail, that falls into a $60 category. They get sentenced to less time. It's way too complicated for me to try to explain, but it's called a straddle cell. And we can get money from the state for that, but we haven't got as much lately because by the time they get sentenced, it's time served. Because the biggest problem is that 18-week that the state is doing. So that's, but as far as what we do bill inmates for their state, well, once again, we cannot bill them until they've been sentenced. So we miss that 18 weeks, we miss a lot of time. But we have over $8 million in bills from people who stayed in our jail.
So
But it's
they
the-
can't, so you can't bill the state for their time served, even though it was before they were sentenced?
Until they get sentenced. So they could spend 300 days here and they get sentenced to 360, we can only bill for that 60 days.
Wow.
What are we doing to collect on the $8 million?
Yeah. We've done many things over the years. We've
What are
used
we
collect-
doing right now?
We're not doing anything because the collection company we last used ripped us off. So we're looking for another alternative. But we use collection companies, we've done some of our own mailings and stuff over the years, and nothing's really increased that return. One thing that another county did is they reduced their rate of charging. So we charge $15 a day, costs us about 60 to 80 depending on the time, but a day for to house an inmate. We charge $15. Some counties charge higher. They don't get as high of a recovery rate either. One county went down to $5 a day, and they say they're getting a better return because they reduced their rate. That was a year ago. I'm not sure if that information's still away, but these are all things we've been researching. But you can try to collect blood out of a turnip. That's why when people are going to jail for not paying fines and costs and not paying their taxes, they just don't have money. So it just comes down to how do you get it. And we do have people that do it. We get restitution checks all the time. Got some today. But they're 5, 10. We got a $54 one today.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, because Monica sends those to us. So. But it's all part of the restitution process. That's restitution, not money for time served. So.
And just to piggyback.
Sorry to rain on.
No, actually, that was a great summary of it. And just to, reinforce that, we had a guy who who pled in late May, and in past years, and again, it's the DOC wanting more time, in past years, that person would have been sentenced at the end of June or early July. Now that person is set for sentencing in September 17th, I think is the date. So there's just a lot of dead time, like the sheriff said, so.
You're saying
Thanks.
the delay in sentencing is from the state?
Yeah, they don't have enough people to do the pre-sentence reports on a timely basis, and there's,
BOC.
yeah, Michigan Department of Corrections.
So the taxpayers will get to eat it.
But they got plenty of people to raise our election costs and all
Yeah.
that stuff,
Yeah.
and not enough people to do this,
Yeah,
of course.
and many other things too.
I'm not saying nothing to keep.
We don't have time for that.
Yeah, I wanna keep, I already put my foot in my mouth twice tonight, I don't wanna do it again.
And I just want to add that the electeds got together and met, and they talked about everything you just heard and a whole lot more, including the 8 million, Jen. And I do remember when that company county hired ripped them off, and it's happened in other counties. This discussion is happening in other counties. I just want to speak a little bit about some of your smaller departments. Yes, we can come back with this number. First off, typically, the 1.9, let's back up a budget cycle. I was here for the approval of that. Roseanne, I specifically remember you shaking your head at that number. So I couldn't see you when the 3.4, but I saw it in my mind. Anyway, it's not going to come to fruition, commissioners, okay? So we need to, as your departments are projecting what they're going to return, we're going to be able to hone that down. Okay, so hopefully we can then extrapolate that over to the 3.4 and come up with a less scary number. Okay, but, and I was trying to explain to you, Commissioner Lawrence, at the end of the last meeting, some of your smaller departments, such as myself, we have placeholders in there, things for like if I get in trouble and I need to hire an attorney, et cetera. So if you stay out of trouble, that all comes back. Okay, so we can do this fairly rapidly. But some of the other things that some of your larger departments, it's going to be tougher. But what I'm trying to say is that a county like Cass, it's not too much cutting and you're into bone. There really isn't the kind of fat that maybe the public portrays to you, Mr. Chair. But it really just, after working for 2 counties, being a county employee and an elected official, I've just been around and seen it, and, it doesn't exist. So we do have to be strategic. And, somebody brought up, the lazy way to do it is say, everybody's got to give up, 4% or whatever. And I talked to a department head, and this is where it could get catastrophic to your smaller departments, because it just may not be there. And I don't mean disrespect by saying, oh, that's the lazy way. Some things are human nature. I mean, seriously. So anyway, as we move through this, let's not get too scared with this 3.4. It's a very scary number. Of course it is. But I don't think that'll be the number.
Right.
Do you? I heard you saying you don't believe it's going to be the number. Vic, you said it. We've talked. So hopefully we're going to be able to, hone that in. But, in a county this size, it's not just all going to come from cuts.
Right.
We've done some things in the last year, right? We updated fee schedules, and we've done this and we've done that. Maybe we can come up with, better ideas or something as far as collecting what is owed us. I just had a call from St. Joe County. They just got a $200,000 DNR grant, and they want to partner up with us in road commission on culverts and trouble spots and everything. So I quickly just said to Bob Thompson, hey, you want me taking this call? And this and that? Oh, yeah. I also got a call from St. Joe County, Indiana.
And now they have got a funding mechanism. They may be able to come into Michigan and help us solve some of our problems, because as we send this water on down, just creating the problems down at South Bend, Mishawaka, Elkhart, they're realizing now you have to go up into the system. They're beginning to look. So, very exciting, because, a border county, this was a terrible frustration. And Roseanne, you've been around long enough to know this. Lansing doesn't understand the border counties.
No, they do not. They
don't understand a lot of things.
100% correct.
And it is.
100% correct. We're a whole different animal.
And it's the whole spectrum, economically, everything. And so, but for once now, but anyway, through the farm bill, and I'm going to quote who told me this, there's a lot of money sloshing around. Okay? So I've never heard that before. So there, I'm not saying there's a bright light at the end of that tunnel, but, it's always darkest before, what I mean? So keep that in mind as we begin to work through this. And, we're brainstorming ideas. Some may fly, some may not, some you may not like. But we're just doing what you're telling us to do. And so I want you to keep that in mind too. It's just brainstorming of ideas. It doesn't mean it's going to come to fruition or not. We don't know. It's still somebody turned around with me when that was presented and said, well, these are really, really rough numbers. And I still believe that. So anyway, don't zero in on somebody or, hang on every word as far as this brainstorming, because that's how we get free flow of information.
They're doing it to me. They're hanging on every one of my words. And I'm being very strategic, believe me, as much as I can.
You mentioned something, and I'm curious, and maybe this isn't something that's an option, but we've heard similar things from a couple of departments, is that the idea of like placeholders, this is kind of worst case scenario sorts of things. Is there any avenue where, I guess what I'm saying is if we're looking at how we would rein in some expenditures, if we have a $200,000 expense or $50,000 expense here or there that, hey, we need to have this in case this happens, does it make sense to have that? I mean, if we never think we're gonna actually use it, I mean, there's nothing that would prevent somebody from coming back to the board and saying, hey,
Yeah,
we need to make an adjustment, we didn't anticipate getting sued.
That's
But we
right.
are, this
Yeah.
is what's gonna happen. I mean, if there are areas like that where maybe we would have traditionally said, we're gonna set this money aside just in case, but maybe we don't put that much aside, or we reduce those in some ways with the idea that we're all gonna work together, and that if those things happen, we know adjustments will be coming. Maybe that's a way to get to a point where we see more of a realistic budget that's being presented in terms of what we actually anticipate. For me at least, if we have budgets where we see a $1.9 million deficit and then, or 1.2, and then it's obviously not that and not even close to that, it raises a lot of questions of why. And if it's things like this, that's one of those areas where maybe there is room to change those things.
Are you ready
try
to tag
reduce
team
those
here?
more.
Well, I just wanna
We
add
can
something.
tap.
I mean, I'm just throwing that out there, are there some of those sorts of things that could be addressed in that?
Well, and you're looking back at us too, I mean, we've talked about that in my area, like institutional care, and I'm willing to zero out institutional care if you want me to. But then I get an email today that we've got a person locked up, and through the end of the fiscal year, it's gonna cost us $29,000. Now, that's not close to even what we have budgeted. We have I think still $200,000 budgeted. So that makes me sick because I don't want to spend $29,000, but we're going to have to. But I'm okay with that. It's just that how it happened in the past was then we also had commissioners upset, coming and saying, okay, I'm going to need over the next 5 months, $45,000 because I've got these 3 kids locked up or whatever. And it'll be something we have to pay. It won't be something that'll be optional. I mean, I guess you guys can tell me no, but I mean, then I'm not sure what'll happen because we are obligated, I mean, we're obligated to, if we've got those kids' house somewhere, we're obligated to pay our bill, so.
Sam had
I think some of the when we spoke about those placeholders, more or less just looking at the data and being able to say, historically speaking, we've had these placeholders, but haven't been used for whatever the parameters set to be appropriate.
I agree, and I mean, we do that analysis, and I'd love to sit down again with Matt and Jen, and if they've got ideas in the courts where they think we should do that, I'm all ears. The biggest issue for me is the reason why the words have been used, we return a lot of money. The biggest reason for me that I see that happen, at least on the numbers that I crunched, is because we have positions open. We don't fill them. I purposely don't fill positions in the courts on purpose to leave them open for a period of time. I didn't do that when Joni Patzer retired, and you know, she was my person that did all my grants because I needed to bring in somebody and get them trained. But we normally do not have super long training periods because I like to take entry-level positions and leave them open so that it saves us the fringes and benefits because they're really expensive.
Yes, they are.
But I don't want to, jeopardize current positions, and I appreciate that being said over and over again. But if we get to a point where we've got it zeroed out, then basically we're not, we're going to be down people, and then or positions, and then we're still always going to be returning money because we're always going to have turnover. So there's no scenario in my mind, and maybe somebody will show me different stuff, but because it's just the nature of the beast. You've seen how many positions sheriffs had open. And so if we get it down to zero, basically what we're doing is then we don't even have any flexibility when we do want to hire somebody and get them trained in that position like I did when Joni retired. Because I don't know how I would have carried out that function without having that level of training,
I'm just, in my mind, I'm just curious, if we were to eliminate those placeholders, what does the budget look like at that point?
I don't know. And I'll be glad to set up an appointment with Matt and Jen if they see specific.
Monica had the first opportunity.
He said he has money for an attorney in case he gets sued. Isn't that what you said?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'll give you another example. We had the dam inspections this year. And so when I met with administration and finance, I said, now, the dam inspections are done, and I've preliminary talked to the engineer that performed them for me. I don't have the final reports yet, but nothing big out there. However, I put a placeholder in case something comes back and they say you got to go up to Birch Lake and fix a wall or something, and there was a couple trees down on one that they're big uprooted ones, and we potentially might have to bring in a big piece of equipment to pull them out. So I put a little placeholder in there, and I'll be more than happy to trim those areas. But understand that ever since Midland failure, before we would file these dam inspections every 3 years, and they'd sit in a box in Lansing somewhere, and then when there was a problem, they'd go get the box out and say, hey, did Cass County file that? Ever since Midland now and Sanford, those dam failures, it's a whole new ballgame. They're going through them. They're going through them, and they're putting together a punch list, and they're giving you a year to take care of that. This is just one example from one little small drain office. So, and I'll be more than happy to, make those adjustments, but understand that, BOC is in charge on dams. I'm just your delegated authority. If they got to get fixed, they got to get fixed.
BOC, like us, BOC.
BOC.
Yeah, if it happens, yeah.
It's county owned.
Yeah.
Shouldn't that line item be an average of what was used and not what it could be?
Right, like worst case scenario compared to what, this is what it usually is, yeah. I don't know,
We were lucky, last couple years, we were able to get some dams removed because there wasn't even any structures. It was like where one lake connected another lake. So I was able to get with the guy at Dam Safety Division, and we've trimmed the list a little bit. We have 19 of those in this county. For a small county, it's a lot.
That's a lot.
And I'm getting one, I'm having an EIT from the Dam Safety Division as a part of his training. He's gonna come and do one for us for free. Now, I was a little nervous to allow him to do this, but I went and inspected it myself. And I'm confident, so I am gonna allow that. And I was able to save us a couple $1,000s by calling a couple different guys on the inspections and this and that. So moral of the story is your smaller departments, we can dig up a little bit of kibble here and there. But, you know, some of your departments, they already ran them kind of lean and mean. It's, you know, it's the type of people you have in your positions, whether it's elected officials or department heads, et cetera. And so there was no way for them to really backfill a kind of hole like this. So the only reason I say that is because I want you to mentally prepare a little bit for that as this comes out. That some of this could be more catastrophic to other departments, and don't take it as poor planning. It's not that. They were just running lean and mean as they were.
Got it.
That's just the nature of the beast.
I want to address the brainstorming ideas and questions. That first one.
Exactly what I came up with.
That first one, I'm not going to really address, but I'd like to say that there's nothing we can do about that, because I talked to Jen a long time ago, like right before all these guys got, the newly electeds come, and I knew that was going to be a question, because I had a question about that, you know. And for us to go back, has the MERS switch saved the county money? Don't know. But I know for us to go back, it would be catastrophic more so than what we got going on now. Am I right or wrong?
Well,
Please.
I'd like to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, please.
So I think with respect to MERS, there's a couple things that we have to keep in mind, right? Is that when a lot of the work started in terms of figuring out what the path would be, we were looking at perpetual increases in terms of what the unfunded liability was. At the last time, before we started some of the changes that have come up, it was $12 million. And it was projected, depending on what that return could be anywhere up to $20 million, depending if returns weren't where we had anticipated them. In the time since the switch from DBs to DCs and those sorts of things, and the freezes, the unfunded liability has gone down to $5 million. So there is a savings, but I think the disconnect comes into play here is what that means. Does it mean that on an annualized basis, we see reduced retirement costs? It doesn't. What it means is that that $12 million we would have had to have come up with in the next 15 to 20 years is now $7. We still have $7 million we have to figure out how we're going to make up for in that time. It's coming down a bit, but it's not going to be something you're going to feel in the annual budget. In fact, it's possible that in some cases like this, you could see some of those costs increase, because you still have the legacy costs from the DB where we're still trying to address that unfunded liability that was there. We're not continuing to add more to it, but you know, I think that's a big thing to keep in mind, is that that $5 million savings off the unfunded liability is a big deal, but it was a future cost. It was something that was always kind of kicking that can down the road. It was gonna come at some point. Now we're bearing some of that cost now, but we are seeing savings in what that liability is out into the future.
All right.
So I think it's important to acknowledge that.
When you're talking that liability and that $5 million, that $5 million is what the fund itself increased. We didn't put any money into it, is that correct?
The $5 million is essentially, when they do the actual reports, they will tell you, you know, this is what anticipated funding you'll need to be able to provide all of the benefits that you've promised to your employees. And this is what the value of your fund is, and over time, here's what the value of your fund will be. So they come up with a report that basically says, do you have enough funding in there now to be able to provide for the benefits that you have in place? At that point, that was $12 million of unfunded liability. So they were saying that over the course of that next 20 years, as people retire, you're going to be $12 million in the hole and not have enough money to be able to fill in that gap.
I understand that.
So yeah, so the $5 million that came off, that $7 million that's there now, that's still $7 million even now that we're gonna have to have funded at some point.
But was that $5 million what the fund grew, or is it the $5 million that we put into it?
The $5 million in reduction was primarily due to the freezes that were put into place and the transitions from DBs to DCs. Those were the biggest changes.
And the legacy costs that we're paying and for the ones that were converted, so it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, I mean, it does, both factors play into it, but.
That answer your question, John?
Yep.
All right.
Got it.
All right, good question, man. I'd like to address that second one. You know, should the county ask voters to restore the Headley rollback for county operating? I don't understand that.
It is an option. The library did it recently.
Yeah, she's,
Well,
Hope,
I-
can you expound on that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because when we first passed it, it was at 5.75. But it go, because the Headley rollback, it goes back, it goes down every year. Now we're down to 4.5702. You could put it back on the ballot and take it back to the 5.75 tax rate. This is not what I suggest. Homeowners in the county are being hit hard already. They're getting hit with a 5% increase in their taxable values this year, which is the maximum, and next year. That, I am not here to advocate it, I'm only telling you, making sure you understand that is an option.
Well, we put it on the ballot, that ain't saying that this is
That
what
is,
kind of.
it might
they
not
have to
pass
vote.
anyway.
Option. I can tell you, I was shocked Jefferson Township put it on the May special election, and their voters passed an additional operating millage. I couldn't believe it. Just due to inflation, and they couldn't operate in Jefferson Township, but it passed, so.
Because everything has gone up.
Barely.
Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
but pass is a
Passed.
pass. You know, pass is a pass. You know?
I mean, that difference of 3
Don't matter
million.
if you win by
Would
an
help,
inch or a
right?
mile. You had me.
I mean, assuming they would pass.
So then what do we do next year with
pretty
next year's
close to
budget?
having that.
Yeah.
4.5 million over. Then what do we do next year with next year's proposed
Oh,
budget's 4.5
because we only
million
can
over?
do this one.
That is, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was devastating for the budget last year, and for it to,
Let's get to the point
I
now
don't,
where it's gonna start depleting our reserves.
And that,
and you can't keep doing that, right.
And we can't do that because we only have $4.5 million in that. And we cannot touch that, because if we do, that's just bad management.
And the truth of the matter is, you know, just as a homeowner in Cass County, if we're deciding that we don't want to provide institutional care, but we have a bunch of non-mandated services we're providing, that's a no for me. We have some non-mandated positions in this county, but we're going to jeopardize not having funding for institutional care?
Give me an
I don't think we
example.
should consider it.
Give me an example
Yeah, what
of
does
some
that mean?
non-mandated
Yeah.
services.
We don't know
Well,
what that means.
well,
Okay.
one of the non-mandated positions we have is marketing. It's a it's not a judgment call, it is non-mandated. But institutional care is mandated. I'm just the treasurer, I don't even know all the mandated, non-mandated
Well,
positions in the county, but maybe that's something that has to be defined and truly looked at.
MSU,
All right.
It's what?
it's been discussed in years past, MSU's been discussed.
So
There
we've
may-
got two. It made this list, but we've only got two positions. One that you all could come up to, and it made this list, so it's gotta be more. Somebody's gotta know more than just that one position. If we eliminated her position, that ain't gonna save the county.
Yeah, there's lots of.
Oh, there are
right.
lots, I'm sure there's lots.
All right.
How do we generate that list?
Well, what are they? What
I
are
mean, they have that list, we've gone over that list
Who's
in years
they?
past. I think it's kept somewhere, you know, I've not seen these folks, but it's
Alright.
been a list generated in administration.
And I know where that guy put them. Not this guy, the other guy. I know where he probably put
And I'm
them.
not saying it like as a pointing a finger, I'm saying.
Me
we've
either.
gone over
I'm
that
not.
exercise
I'm-
Before and said mandated, not mandated.
But it has to be a factor when you've got this much, $3 million you're looking at. It has to be
If we look
part of
at-
the discussion, that's all.
If we look at
Reason
the
we brought it up.
non-mandated positions and eliminating all those, and I'll say that one this time, and it won't save the county, then that's, you
Right.
know, but, you know, we're doing it across the board.
Sure.
You know, but I just want to, you know, you only got two exampents. I'd like to know, like he said, I'd like to know, what are they? Yeah.
If I could say about MSUE, well, we went round and round.
Oh,
about
boy,
that. Oh, my God. When we
$65,000 a
left-
year?
When she left the meeting,
Oh, yeah.
our MSU person was in tears.
Which I love MSU.
But.
I do
but-
too.
It's not
And,
mandated.
and we said to MSUE, can we just get 4-H?
And we done never, and I argued about it, and I resigned from that committee because they wouldn't talk right, you know, because that's what I went. We don't have a 4-H fair, so
And
why even have
everybody-
them?
Right, and everybody felt that 4-H was something that was too important to the community as a whole. So
We can
there
still
where
have
was
that
at,
without
but I sure-
MSU.
I would be
Yeah,
interested,
Yeah, good.
I would be interested in hearing what other non-mandated services we have.
I would.
And I think getting that list is the key. I mean,
Yeah.
if it's out there, we just.
Yeah, where is?
Let's also make a list of how well our
I've never
services
seen
are
it.
performed, because statutorily, we
They
have to
said
be
they-
barely
they've reviewed
adequate.
it,
We have
but,
to
what was that?
We have to be barely adequate for the services we provide statutorily.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we're all well above barely adequate.
For our mandated,
But if we're gonna talk mandated, non-mandated, we need to talk about adequate services or above standard services.
And we haven't done this for a while, but I would say everything is like pre-2020. What about taking a look at our fees and services? For fees for service that we have? So, as an example, does the state set what a marriage license costs, or do
They
we
do,
set it?
and
They
we've
do.
asked that it's been the same fee for 40 years.
You're kidding
We're
me.
begging them to.
It costs us a lot of money.
Yeah, the state.
How much is it,
frustrating.
$20?
$20.
and we can't
We're
raise that?
asking them to up it to 50, so our
I pay that
lobbyists.
to Mary Mark again.
Oh, that's sweet.
The marriage fee.
So,
Divorce fee.
yeah, our lobbyists are working. There are some fees, very few that you all can set here at the local level.
Very few.
I don't know about other offices, but for my
For yours,
office, the
yes.
state mandates
Like the death,
way too many.
what about the death certificates? Are those free?
No death certificates, but I have trouble, our fees are $15
Yeah.
for the first and $5 for any additional. And I think that's a good amount of money.
Yeah, because I remember asking for my grandmother's and it was $15.
Yeah.
Could you put a $30 processing fee on that, or paperwork fee, along with the 20?
No.
Let's do the non-dying ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We're already at their
Don't,
lowest, let's not
don't
do
put
it.
another more burden on them.
We get creative with things like with our online services, we charge IT fees to
Okay.
pay for our servers and housing data and things because the state mandates fees for images. Yeah, they restrict so many things.
So who's gonna do that list for the non-mandated items?
No, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. I'm
'Cause if we don't get a list, I'm gonna delete it from my memory.
I would
Yeah.
assume electeds and department
Well,
heads.
I mean, like, I can only speak for courts, but I mean, that was why in my letter that I did for the budget, I put what things were mandated. I mean, as far as getting a complete list of like all the duties that are mandated, just for front of the court, I know I was gonna print it and bring it to this meeting, but that page is like 18 pages
That's
long.
fine. Send it to
So-
us digitally, please.
Yeah, no, so I mean, so it
Yeah.
just depends on, because then somebody has to like draw all of those things to each position, which we've done in the
Hey.
past.
I'd like to see it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that's gonna be hard, but
Hold on.
you're probably not gonna find this position is mandated, you're gonna find certain services.
Service, yes,
are
and
we've
mandated.
tied them to
So
positions.
that's where you have.
Yeah.
have-
Yeah,
And Sam had a good idea, that organizational chart that you all sent, could that be put on there, mandated, not mandated, mandated, not mandated, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, like Matt said, I mean, the tricky part is for example, everybody that works in the courts, we're gonna be having them do mandated services because courts are mandated.
Mm-hmm.
But there are different aspects of their job, you know, like, there's things we do to help each other out department-wise that are not mandated.
That ain't what we're asking.
And it does get real messy because our GIS department is amazing. We've beefed it up tremendously since they were in my office. It's not mandated though.
You all have it on here, non-mandated.
Well- Well-
A majority, the positions themselves aren't mandated, but the products are. So if you're not producing them in-house, you would need to contract them out.
That is correct.
Yeah, we don't wanna do that.
Description.
Right.
Something else that we could look at too, outsourcing.
No, that weighs too much money. Because I think that'd be more expensive than having it in-house.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we have the City of Dowagiac MOU for the GIS services, is because it's significantly cheaper for
Yeah.
them to pay us $75,000 a year than to contract out to Whiteman.
What I meant was, I
Well,
didn't
maybe
mean
we
to
should
make
charge
this
them 100.
Oh.
outsourcing, but look at how much outsourcing is being done in the county and look at what
We
we're
can do
paying out
internally.
internally,
Yeah, yeah.
because we could hire people like she's talking about to do it cheaper than to have it done on the outside.
And
But it wouldn't be as
We gotta
good.
pay benefits.
Still cheaper.
Yeah.
Hope's shaking.
With our benefits.
Hope's doing east and west.
Benefits we're paying on.
It's not productive, well, sit here and
Double.
keep.
Yeah, I'm
smashing our
just
heads
saying,
together.
I'm just saying that.
We have to
that's
pick a
something we
path
can look at.
forward that we can all collectively work towards, and that's what we all want, right?
Right?
Nobody's saying, hey, you gotta reinvent the wheel and make that absolute zero, else we're not gonna pass it.
But no, that's a good.
Do your best to work backwards from what you proposed to get towards zero, and then we can all talk about it.
That's what I put on, that was what I said in the beginning. Then I got attacked.
It's been a
Just
good,
to clarify,
it's been a
Not
good
you.
discussion.
Administration or other
Yeah, it's
departments.
been a good discussion.
I would just like to make a recommendation, if we're gonna.
And I
take
knew
the
you would, he
14th
just didn't say
to
it, so I just
deadline,
wanted to make sure he
can we just do another?
included it.
Workshop?
Another workshop?
So, so we've got, say that
It
question
doesn't have to be on the
again.
14th, but like maybe that next week.
Say that question again, so everybody
If
can
the
hear
14th is
it.
gonna be our tentative day to try to
Maybe we can
revise some numbers,
Mm-hmm.
can we just have another workshop shortly after the 14th, so we can all sit back in the same room and talk about the same stuff again?
You never know.
Or to be more conducive for individual electeds and department heads to meet with admin and Jen separately? How do you guys wanna do it? What's the best for you guys?
What's the best
Does,
avenue?
you know, we came up with these 5 points. Does anybody else have ideas? I mean, this is, does anybody else have ideas?
Yeah, but
What were they?
that was the
You
idea
said
right
fees.
there.
What other ideas are out there?
You know, I mean, there's a few things we can look at.
I kinda like the
Hold
idea.
on.
You know, I mean, one thing would be looking at,
Alright,
you know, and I'm not
Bring in this.
advocating for anything necessarily, I'm just, when we look at retirement benefits, we've taken care of our existing employees. A good point, something to consider would maybe be to look at for newly hired employees.
Yeah.
Does our existing, you know, obviously we wanna take care of our existing staff, but if we start looking at what the cost of those benefits are, I mean, does it make sense to look at whether some difference for newly hired employees might make sense? I mean, I'm not saying
Hold
that's
on,
necessarily.
Mary's next from the board.
Should we consider that?
You had said, you know, maybe just meeting with Matt or have, and Ryan said maybe have another meeting. I kind of like the interaction with everybody to throw out ideas. I've learned some stuff here tonight that I didn't know. And that's up to you, Matt, but I kind of like everybody in the same room so we can kind of
On the
hash
same
this out.
page.
Yeah.
Right, and it's not like, well, they said this and they said that.
So with that said, we've got a lot of sidebars going on here, and I will end this meeting immediately if that continues. All right? Because this is important, and we've got a lot of things, and something's gonna get missed, you know, and I will not be to blame for that, and I will end that right now. So, one at a time, please. I'm only gonna ask once. That's my last time answer. I will end this meeting. Who's next?
Well, the reason I asked them, because I'm in the same situation as Monica. I don't have much of anything to cut. But I want to know there's some hope. There's some ideas, some good ideas, and we came up with some, but surely you guys, somebody has some more good ideas.
Well, I thought Matt's was a good idea.
I do, I agree. I didn't think of that. That's,
Something to look at.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna vary from department to department, but I mean, we can
Absolutely.
also look at, I mean, obviously, there's two sides to the equation. We either find ways to control expenditures, or we find ways to increase revenues. So, I mean, there are things, can we look at, are there services that we could provide? I mean, I know a good example, GIS, working with our local units to
Yes.
say, hey, can we offer contracted services? I think that's a perfect example of how we can try to do them. And it's gonna be different for every department. Yeah, I'll use one example, not a lot of money, but something like our CDBG loans. We outsource that to the city to administer.
To
There's
Dewaj,
an
yeah.
administrative fee involved in that. Is there a capacity for us to bring some things like that into the county and we administer it ourselves? Yeah, there's a little extra work, but does the administrative fee that we earn from that make sense for us to keep it? Not a huge amount, but everything adds up. I
Yeah.
mean, so
Yeah.
ideas for generating additional revenues would be a big one.
And to
We're
answer,
doing that with a lot of our partner services. I know that was on this list. IT will be something that we have finally gotten everything squared away with medical care. We're shooting for the end of the summer to have that. We would anticipate that being a pretty sizable, you know, revenue. I mean, it's in the budget already, but we've already anticipated that. In terms of Facilities, we're working through that now. Woodlands is actually gonna be looking to join us soon. I mean, I would say we still need to kind of look at the end of the year, where did we end up in terms of revenues on that? I can tell you that I think with the changes we've made in maintenance in general, or facilities in general, we've reduced our reliance on contractors. So that alone has been a big savings, and we are generating revenues from outside. I mean, so we've been trying to figure out that. I mean, we've been looking at trying to partner with local townships on things like website development, as an avenue. Or, you know, when we start expanding things like IT and facility services, can those things be expanded out to our local units? I mean, there's a lot of things like that we can look at. It's not a quick fix, it's something we can look at for the future.
Go ahead, Roseanne.
Because we have a couple of townships, maybe more, that they don't have a website. And that's a good idea.
Yes.
And it would be so much less for us to do it for them than it would be if they had to go to Civic Plus or someplace like that.
But it doesn't have to be so much less. Why should we negate what our people are doing for less money if they're gonna pay more for it in the private sector?
Well, I get what you're saying, but.
Okay, so don't charge them 95%, but charge them 80%.
Okay, yeah, or something.
Don't punch yourself short for way less money.
Yeah, I get what
I
you're
think
saying.
that's what we're trying to get to, is to
Yeah.
find that sweet
That
spot
happy
where,
medium.
you know, it provides a benefit to utilize the county
Yeah.
for those services, but, you know, isn't something we're breaking even per se. I mean, we want it to be something where, I mean, at minimum, we have to do that. We're not gonna do it where we're spending money.
No,
but,
you're right,
you know,
but
ideally, if we can
that's-
find a way to drive some revenue creation
Yeah.
here at the county, that's the ideal scenario.
Was that your idea too, Jennifer? You had your hand up.
I did, but I was letting her finish. Yeah, I do have some comments to make. It's my turn.
No, yeah, you're, and then Mary's next.
I'm just throwing that out, something out. Go ahead. Is there?
Yeah, she's going, and then you're
Go ahead.
next.
So there's been a few things, that I've just kind of jotted down as they came up. Some are small, some are a little bit bigger. Me and Matt have talked a lot about new employees coming in and looking at those MERS contributions. Maybe even possibly putting a vesting period. Trying to get some longevity out of it, and then if they choose to leave, then, you know, the county's portion is forfeited up until that vesting point. Something a little bit smaller, making more of a push for EFTs through accounts payable. Check stock is very expensive, printers are expensive, the toner is expensive. Those costs are adding up, as well as mailing them out rather than it just going through the bank and just being done. So there's a lot of cost. That might not seem like a lot. GIS, I know that there's been some cost increases, and so maybe we look at all of our fee schedules again, because a lot of things have increased in price lately, and maybe we do need to take a look at those. Maybe some of them won't change, but I do know definitely GIS has mentioned something to me about maybe we need to increase these, because we're barely coming out even on some of these. Another thing that came up, I believe, at address reading technician. A lot of times, that position is seen in 911. They have their own special millage where that position is coming out of the general fund right now. And so does it make sense that it's under the general fund rather than 911, maybe having some conversations more on that. And speaking of special funds, a lot of times we charge grants for indirect costs. If anybody has questions about indirect costs, please let me know. But with special funds, why are we not charging them some indirect cost? There's IT costs associated to helping, our help desk or whatever, helping over there whenever there's a problem in 911. We're cutting the payroll for those things, so I don't understand why we're not charging any indirect costs over to some of those special funds. And bringing some of that money back into the general fund. And then any revenues that are due to the county, I think we should take a look at making sure that we're collecting the money that's owed to us, or at least making a conscious effort to be doing so. $8 million just just in the jail, I'm curious what else is out there that, is due to the county that we're not seeing and that not a lot of action is being taken.
Mary?
Okay, it was, do we have a building we can sell?
That surplus
Is
property.
that,
No, that's a
is that
good.
a sacred topic?
No, I laugh at that because
Or
I thought
property,
about that.
or
with that-
property,
That surplus property we have,
Yeah.
Yeah,
we have
Yeah.
a committee for that.
But again, not to negate your point, but if we sell a building this year, what do we do next year when
well,
it's more
yeah,
money?
see, that's the
Yeah.
problem, that's the problem, is we're in the spot
Short-term.
we're in.
Yeah,
And this is when we need to really start, maybe even having monthly meetings on, what's going on and stuff. We have to start being really careful and watch what we're spending
yeah,
and watch our services.
yeah.
Is this service that's being provided, is it giving us enough bang for our buck? Or is it something we can hire somebody in-house to do it? We need to watch every single thing going forward because we don't want to end up in the spot again. We don't.
Because I'm so glad you said that, because that'll validate that budget committee. And that's something that budget committee can do. Because you and Jim are here every week looking at the budget and the claims and all that stuff. That'd be a good committee for you all to do instead of doing that, because those claims are already done, and
I know,
approved.
but sometimes
But-
we catch things.
Yeah, but that's something that you all could also be doing also is into the budget,
Well, what do you think?
I'm willing to do if you are.
Okay,
Yeah.
it'd be nice if someone else could be on the committee too, in case Jim and I get hit by a bus, somebody knows.
If you get hit by a bus, we got other issues, but I have 14, but I'd like to be on that.
Honestly,
No?
I'm reluctant to form a committee on this subject.
Yeah.
It's not a personal thing, I think we all need to take responsibility here for this,
Just take responsibility as a whole.
as a board.
Okay,
All right, that's even better yet.
but we do have to do our due diligence with
Yeah,
this.
but we still have to meet, and
Yeah.
Sam and I talked just recently, and why aren't we starting this meeting on a regular basis, like right after we vote this budget in, that's where we start working on the next budget, and start meeting on a
In
regular
the
basis.
committee of the
working on
whole,
Working on the next
Yeah.
budget,
Right.
instead of waiting till the last minute where we gotta make all these decisions and so on and so forth, and it's gotta be done right now and quick. We gotta get it done because we gotta have this budget in.
oh my God, yeah.
A lot of the budgeting process is outside of our purview, though.
I can tell you that I don't think that adjusting the timeline in some respects would be impossible. I mean, I think we certainly could look at moving things up in some respects, but there are certain things that we would not be able to know at that point. I mean, when you look
Right,
at
well,
state shared revenue, certain grants, certain other things, we would not have that, October 1st for what we're gonna see October 1st of the following year. We just wouldn't. I mean, even partner organizations, like health department, things like that, I mean, we still haven't gotten some of the numbers from them on certain things. I mean, so I get what you're saying, and maybe having some of those kind of higher level discussions may not be a bad idea, but, maybe if we start talking February, March, that time frame, moving it a couple months earlier could be possible, but 6 months, I mean, I don't think that's probably something that would be achievable.
Roseanne's got a
I did,
comment.
what's our health insurance cost gone up? What percentage have we,
I think it was an average of about 7%.
that's not too bad.
No, it's actually not, I think the first year it was here, it was like 14%.
14, yeah, that's not too bad. Yeah. I wanted to ask Ben Cohen that, but I didn't.
Jen, did you have something that wasn't?
I was just gonna ask for clarification, what building were you speaking of selling? Because I know we've talked about building new buildings
Oh,
too, so I'm
boy.
just very confused.
This one?
This one?
Will I get in trouble? But no, the library.
Oh, boy. We can't.
Oh, I thought
yeah.
they wanted that for free.
Yeah, they want that for $1.
Oh,
Because we already tried to sell it to them for 600,000 and then 300,000.
Right?
Carol, please.
I was just gonna say, and again, I'm just speaking for myself, but I think it would be great if we could have workshops on some of these topics to kind of pan out. I understand we got to get this budget done, and I'm not saying that, but like, for example, what you were talking about, like having different benefits for new hires, figuring out how that is, because when we asked those questions, when we were going through it before, we were told, well, certain categories, they all have to be treated the same. So if we could get information to share at that kind of a workshop thing, so we would know what the options were, and also to talk about what kind of employment force we want. Because if we didn't have to pay so much in some of these fringe benefits, maybe we could share some positions. People love to work remote now. Maybe we could have some, greater use of part-time positions, but have the flexibility of working remotely, et cetera. I mean, because we all have our ideas, but we need to know, like, what kind of a workplace and services do you want provided? Do you all want it to be brick and mortar? What do you want it to look like? Because we could brainstorm some of those things to then know, what are you open to us looking into? You know what I mean? Because you know what happens if I say, well, hey, the courts are looking at doing this, then there's grumbling of, oh, well, we can't do that over here or whatever. Well, I don't want it to be that way. I'd rather we had discussions about it and built consensus on what do we want it to look like around here. Because the world's changing whether we want to it or not. And some of these things, our costs are always going to continue to go up as long as we have employees, because they're going to get eventually some raises. I mean, they just are. No matter if you can flatline most of the stuff, our insurance always goes up. I mean, I think there's only been 1 year I was here that it was like 0.05, like 0.5% or something. But if we could have more meetings where we could share these ideas, because it feels like that COVID really ruined a lot of our relationships. And like, there's always this distrust, like that we're doing things for the wrong reasons. And that's fine if people want to think that even about me. But I'm always trying to think about, like, how could we work together to make something great here? Monica and I talked about, with the file room, maybe we could sometime when we have somebody retire, think about, could we blend some positions and do some stuff and have it be part-time people? But that takes planning, negotiating with our union. It's not something that happens at budget time. So, and because we're all working elected officials, it's not like we necessarily have that time set aside to do it. So, but if we could have some of those discussions where we could build consensus, that would be really helpful to us. Because when I bring it up then, somewhere and you find out, oh, well, nobody else is interested in that. Okay, great. Then I'll know it's just my crazy idea. But I mean, like, that's what these big meetings are really helpful for, because,
we don't have enough of.
And this is a good one, too.
And I mean, because, and the more we do these kinds of things, we'll know, well, yeah, that might be the direction we'd like to go or not go, instead of it always being us all siloed and thinking that we're all kind of working at cross purposes, which I don't think we are.
I agree.
So I wanted to comment though on the collect the money owed to us. I just want to make the pitch, at least from my perspective, because as court administrator, I devoted a lot of time to increase collections in the courts. It's not as simple as you think, because the clientele that the courts deals with are not like the most reliable citizens. And I devoted a lot more energy than probably in a lot of instances I should have. And the collecting money is a really hard one, because you can throw a lot of time, man hours, and work at it and see very little return. I'm not saying we shouldn't try to do it, but it's like one of those things, like I tell in the front of the court, we're spinning our wheels if we don't kind of operate like a collection agency. A collection agency just doesn't go after everybody till the end of time. At a certain point, they say this is a bad debt and they write it off. And in the courts, at least historically, they haven't ever let us write off debts. They've just let them keep growing, But in practicality, I'm not going to spend taxpayer resources to be going after somebody that, has multiple judgments, multiple problems.
There's somebody right behind you that can do that job for us.
That can do collection for us?
Well, she can at least look into it.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know.
Not in front of the court, that's all confidential. But anyway, people don't want their child support known to everybody in the world, and it's confidential. But anyway, I'm just saying, like, it's definitely worth looking into, but it's not, it sounds pretty straightforward, but collection is a complicated situation, because most of the people we see, at least when I was doing it and setting up meetings, they were also the same people that owed child support, they owed the jail, they owed us, they owed a whole bunch of people. So, it's, those garnishments, and then the garnishments cost money. So it depends on how much you tell us you want us to invest in that, because, there's a fee for all those, so.
Right. Well, there's a proverbial horse in the middle of this chamber, and we're beating it to death. I say we've talked enough. That's me, you know, but if anybody has any objection to that, I'd say we end this and go ahead.
Just one quick
Go
thing
ahead,
on
yeah.
bullet point number 2 here on raising the tax, like, I just wanna get a little more perspective on that. I mean, that's not something that I'm for necessarily, but, you know, I do believe that the voters have the responsibility to make that decision themselves. But to points made by Ryan, you know, how does that prevent us from getting in this situation again? I'm just throwing it out there that where there will be raising, you know, there are gonna be costs that are gonna be raising no matter what. And we do need to figure out a way to kind of generate revenues.
It's not just
If
the
the voters
Headley, but
support it,
overall.
then that's the voters' decision.
Yeah, maybe not just the Headley, because that only does it once, but maybe the property.
It's something to think, if you're going to discuss it, do it next year when you're gonna pay for an election regardless, because as we discussed, the
Costs
cost
money.
of elections are
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Half $500,000 for
We're
3
gonna
elections.
pay for 3 standalone elections in 2024.
Yeah.
If you wanna do it on one of those ballots, cause we're paying for them anyway. Something to think about. Dowagiac Schools just, I mean, there are several entities that have done it. Dowagiac Schools just got it in May.
Library did it.
Many entities, they do it regularly.
Vic,
I just
please.
want, thank you.
I thought you were eating again.
I will be shortly, there's plenty of food out there. Just one closing comment. I do think one of the really good ideas I heard here, I don't love it, but I think it's a realistic thing, is the idea of, for new employees, you know, modifying that retirement plan. I think that's a realistic thing to consider, so, you know, just for what it's worth, I think that makes some sense.
I'd say.
One thing I do have to
Go
say
ahead.
about that, my husband works for the state of Michigan. And his benefits ain't nothing, like Cass County, as far as retirements and everything like that. His is good, not saying it's not good, but, I mean.
We got some of the best in the state.
So I think just bringing them down to where a lot of other businesses are, for entry level even, would be feasible, very, very easily
If you're looking
feasible.
at new hires, I mean, I think that we're not gonna be having any effect on existing employees. I mean, and we know turnover can happen, but as that turnover happens, then that's where you're gonna realize some of the savings on the retirement and things.
Yeah, cause I mean, it would save you a lot going from what they have now
Yeah.
to what, like even just my husband does at the state, which isn't bad benefits.
Well, and there's multiple ways to go about it. I mean, you can look at the actual matching ratios, you can look at vesting schedules, some combination of the two. I mean, there's a number of ways to
Oh,
go
yeah.
about it,
Yeah.
depending on how you want it.
And then like Carol said, maybe having more part-time positions, because some people, if they're on entry level, sometimes they're not huge about benefits, they're just a little bit higher pay and getting the experience, and I mean, there's,
If you had some part-time roles that maybe had increased flexibility in terms of hours or time or something, if you could find ways to make things like that work, that could be potentially
Or like-
advantageous to some employees, depending on.
or like
You have to
mothers
make sure
looking
you
for
meet the needs of
part-time
the office.
jobs.
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah,
All right, people are zipping up and packing up. We good?
we good.
Meeting's adjourned. Don't, well, he's got a broken
Matthew, you have a good night there.
This was, this should be and then the motion override drops into this.
I should have brought some baggies to take some stuff.
If they pass back, then, I mean, unless we were. Not for just one.
which
Have a good night.
units
Have a good night.
optimization.
Have a good vacation.
I don't know what other.
That's rain every day and
But
high temperature.
It's something to look at.
The head like right too when they were talking about budget ideas,
But I
that's the
will
first thing that came up. And, Tammy was in the same partner, so.
Sam, I just want to introduce you.
Hey,
Eric Asplin, this is our GIS director.
And he's lucky he's
Good idea. So
Yeah.
companies and how they maintain prices here, so you can have these benefits.